Hello and welcome to another episode of WhipChat. My name is Christian, and this week we are joined by none other than Paul Nolan. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, Christian, how's it going? Good to be here, man.
Hey, I'm so glad to have you. For those that don't know, I don't know who wouldn't know who Paul Nolan is, but for those that don't know,
weird to hear,
right? Well, I mean, I think we've all heard of you. I mean, it's just like we aspire to be able to be consistent and have them out as much as you do. But we'll get to that. So Paul has been a professional whip maker for over 20 years, making thousands of whips. You are a multi-award-winning whip handler, and your whips have appeared in numerous movies and TV shows, and is used on stage and famously used in a Discovery Channel, how it's made with the bullwhip, which was very entertaining to watch as well. I've watched that several times.
That was a fun time. I was busy and hard too. I think it was like a 16, 17-hour day.
Oh my goodness. Did they just hang out with you for the whole thing?
Well, it's one of those where I thought they were going to go through the whole thing. But just in case, I'd spent the month before prepping like whips in different stages, just in case. Because I'm like, you know how people who don't know whips don't understand how much time it actually takes. And so we started going through the process, and I think we were just at the part where we were like cutting the overlay. And he was like, and I think we were maybe like 8 hours in at that point. And he was like, so we're about done, right? Like, we're not even close, man.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I bet he was in for a surprise. I bet they all appreciated it a lot more afterwards too. It certainly seemed to come through in the video.
Oh, cool. Yeah. We had a lot of fun. They were a nice group. It was like a crew of like 4 guys, I think.
Yeah.
And we had I remember we had some fun when we were shooting the stuff outside because we were out in the desert and there's all these big tumbleweeds that are like 3-4 foot tall. Whoa. And they were trying, one of the other guys was, while they were filming, like we were filming the whip cracking part or whatever, one of the guys was trying to like roll a tumbleweed by. It didn't end up working out, but.
That's fun though. How long ago was that?
Oh man, I think that might have been, I think we shot it in 2009, something like that.
Nice. Yeah, I noticed the aspect ratio wasn't even widescreen on the clip I found. So
yeah, I think it's only in 720p. Also, it's not even like it looks grainy nowadays.
I don't know if I'd get in trouble if I showed another YouTube clip on YouTube, but I can post a link to a copy of it I found. It'll be down in the description.
Yeah, I found that they change up sometimes. Like sometimes the links on YouTube will go away, and then someone else will post it or something like that, or they'll repost it. So
yeah, exactly. How did they find you, or how did they get a hold of you for something like that? That's
the way that they told me evidently was it's funny because I saw the How It's Made show years earlier. I was in the hospital with my girlfriend had appendicitis, and I had never had cable. So like we were sitting there watching TV, like, oh my God, cable, you know, and that show came on. I was like, man, that'd be perfect for whip stuff. I should reach out to them. Never did. Like 3 years later, they called me and they were like, hey, yeah, the guy the director or the producer, or whatever, he just like came into their research guy and was just like, hey, go look at MidwestWhips and get these guys. That's evidently what was said.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess he stumbled on it himself or something. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it's almost like I was saying in the intro. It's just whenever we're talking about whips, MidwestWhips seems to be, and Paul Nolan just seems to be part of the conversation. And it's really amazing that you've been able to just be everywhere, kind of.
I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist, man, or foreign language. I took a lot of foreign language classes in school. Don't remember much of it anymore. But I think, as far as I know, I think in my school district, I was the only one to take 3 foreign languages at once for 5 years, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Which languages did you take? Well,
I wanted to do a bunch of others, but all they had available was Spanish, French, and German.
Do you still know them? Can you speak it somewhat?
Bits and pieces. I can understand it better than I can speak it at this point. Wow. But it's also just been so long, you know?
Sure. Do you still have a desire to dabble in some of that sort of stuff? Or
I find it interesting, but I think I probably would. Well, I don't know. It might have been a fun career, but I don't know. I'm kind of enjoying this left turn that my life took at a young age, you know?
Right.
Just rolling with it. I never expected to be doing this for a living, let alone this long, you know?
Right. So how did that happen? I mean, so you're in school, you're going to be a multilingual psychiatrist, sort of thing, right? I mean,
the world's first.
The world's first.
No, I was going to school trying to figure stuff out and wanted to get out of there as quick as possible because it bored me to death. Like I was always like kind of like to figure stuff out on my own. Like I would go to the library 3-4 times a week and check out books on anything that just piqued my interest at any time.
Oh, that's cool.
And but with the whip stuff, so I don't know. I was just a huge Indiana Jones fan when I was a kid. Like we only had a few VHS copies, and they were like not store-bought copies. They were like recorded off TV. So there's a bunch of parts of the movies for a long time that I didn't know were in there. A bunch of clips because they had cut it out for commercials, you know?
Oh no.
But I just would stare at that and just watch them over and over again. And I wanted the whip so badly. And this is all, this is probably, I don't know, mid 90s or so. There's not really any internet or anything.
Right.
I couldn't find where to get one. I used to beg my mom to take me to tack shops whenever I'd look them up in the phone book. And whenever we were like going somewhere near there, I'm like, let's just stop by there. I want to see if they have a whip, And then I think the way I found David Morgan and Western Stage Routes, which was Mark Allen Productions at the time.
Right. Okay.
Randomly found it. I was in a bookstore and I was looking through magazines and there was a back section of the Lucasfilm Fan Club? I think later became the Star Wars Insider or something like that.
Okay.
And they had this like one page with like one sentence ads. And one was the man who made the whips for Indiana Jones, David Morgan, and had the address or whatever. Okay, and then the other one was Mark Allen's one. I don't remember what it said exactly. Something like, the real Indiana Jones whip or something like that. So I just sent out to both of them for catalogs. And then when I saw how much they cost, at like 9 or 10 years old, you're like, that's $1 million,
Right.
But I'd always been crafty and like made stuff myself. So I was like, I'll try to make that. And I just kind of like dove down the rabbit hole and just became obsessed.
Wow.
And the less I could make it look like the movie, like the more it was like the difficulty I found, the more driven I was. I was like, I have to figure this out. I don't know why. I just have to figure this out.
Wow. No, I can relate to that. Actually, I think somewhere I have an old copy of a Mark Allen catalog around here.
Those are fascinating to look at.
And I wish I could buy stuff for those prices today.
Yeah, right. I have a David Morgan catalog from, I think it's like 1964.
Whoa, cool.
And it's crazy. Like it's insanely just like the way money changes and cost changes over time. It's like, you see it, like, I think a Rawhide was like $6 or something like that.
Oh my gosh. But still, I'm sure the products though are probably about the same as they are now. I mean, that's cool about whips.
Well, I think to see what they used to have and what they don't have anymore, and there was that portion of time where Morgan offered the 16 plat classic bullwhip, I think is what he called it.
Okay.
And there was one guy at the event, I forget if it was this year or last year at the LA Con, that had one of those. And those are just really hard to find. He only offered them for a few years. And they were really, really expensive. So not a lot of people had them,
Whoa, cool. No, I didn't get to see that there. Wow. Wish I had been able. For those watching the show, you're working on a whip actually as we speak here. You're tying some knots.
Yeah, working on a knot on a saddle tan. Very
nice.
The work never stops.
It doesn't. That's a good thing, though. You're still. I assume you're making lots of sales, lots of business coming in and out, and still producing quite a few.
Oh yeah, like with whips, it's always. Especially, I've started to see the pattern more and more as the decades go on. But where it's like, there's these slow months, and then there's busier months, and it's just there's only so much time in the day to make a whip. You take, it's so time consuming. So it's. That's why things fluctuate so much. Sometimes it'll be like, I've got a short wait time. And then that word gets around real quick. And then suddenly it's a really long wait time.
Right. Oh, my goodness. How many whips a year do you think you make?
I don't even know how to calculate that. It fluctuates, obviously. And it depends on lengths and stuff. Like if it's a year with a lot of 4 foots, then there's going to be more. If there's a year with a lot of 10 foot, it's going to be less, But I'm sure it's definitely hundreds. I don't have like an exact number though.
No, that's good. So back when you were 10 years old and you've just got to figure it out, how did you dive down that rabbit hole? Was it like I think it was Townsend who said he started cutting up leather jackets? I may have the story.
Oh, really?
Like just different people found their first stuff they're going to use. I live close to Tandy Leather. I found a roll that I thought looked like this is probably what kangaroos like, and it was goat.
Oh yeah.
But
super stretchy, right?
Yeah, oh my goodness.
I'd messed around with goat at one point. Yeah.
I mean,
I tried a bunch of stuff. I experimented with like all sorts of stuff back in the day. And basically, I think that's one of the big things of really learning this is you just have to try so many things and then not only find what's good, what's bad, but also what works for you. And sometimes for some whip makers, like their methods wouldn't work for me, but they work great for them. And my method wouldn't work for them, but it works good for me. So
is there anything in particular you can think of that, is you feel like it's just a Paul Nolan sort of thing that sets you apart and other makers do it that way?
I'd say it's the holistic knowledge of it. Like it's because I very much tailor my stuff to the use case, and I've studied so many different whip makers that where I not just like the whip itself that they make, but also like their methodology and their thought process and what they're like. Morgan is such an efficiency guy, Okay. So even to the extent of like how he would do certain things, it was all about just like efficiency, repetition. Even when I saw this clip of him once cutting, and it was even the thought of efficiency was to like where he had the trash can right below the edge of where he cut. So when he trim, he just drops the thing. So he doesn't have to go and throw it in the trash. It's just like, boom, drops right in the trash can. He'd use his arm to measure and stuff like that.
Right.
Wow. So that's like kind of, if I had to like put it to one word, that was like his mentality with it, And I think he was an engineer guy. I think he was an engineer major or something like that.
Okay.
And then like, just like different kind of things like that. And then it's like, well, what is this best used for? Like I have certain models that are like, oh, this is great for targeting. Mm-hmm. This is really well balanced for wraps, like body wraps and stuff, So I try to like tailor it to what, especially if it's like a performer or something, it's like, okay, well, what kind of stuff do they do? Are they more rhythm? They'll probably want a lighter whip if they're going to be doing like parades and stuff where you're having to crack whips for an hour walking really slowly down a road,
True. So
you have to think about that stuff for the balance for that, where it still has to be well balanced and crack well, but can't like wear you out as much and stuff.
So who all have you studied? I don't want to say under per se, but researched and felt like you have a good feeling for their mindsets for different makers.
I feel like Morgan, Jacka, Joe Strain, Cecil Henderson. I did a lot of research on him for a long time. Are you aware of who?
I'm not super familiar with him. No.
Okay, he was an old whip maker, actually from a family of whip makers from, let's see, I think his grandfather started the Henderson whip making firm in Australia in like late 1800s, 1880, 1890, something like that.
Okay.
And then the father took over, and I think he was born, I forget the year exactly, but it was something like 1890, 1899 or something like that. So when he was 14 or 15, he started working with his dad, him and his two brothers. What was it, Rupert and Dudley, I think? And
my goodness,
they ended up taking over, and then at a certain point, the two brothers kind of like probably maybe in the 50s or so, 40s, they like retired, I guess, from whip making, and then Cecil kept going until he died, I think in like 1960, 61, something like that.
Wow.
But essentially, I think he's kind of, he did a lot of fancy work, like stuff that you'd be like, whoa, today, even, and we're talking back 100 years ago,
Right.
And so, his whips were also, from what I've discovered, it looks like his whips were the first rawhide whips ever used in Hollywood films also.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, the way I traced it, essentially, it's like, because was it Will Rogers used his stuff, Douglas Fairbanks in the 1925 Don Q Son of Zorro. Those are all Henderson stock whips.
Really? Wow.
And there was this guy named Snowy Baker, or Reginald Baker or something like that, but he went by Snowy.
Okay.
And he was a silver medal boxer for the Olympics for Australia. And then at some point he decided to become a stunt guy because like Hollywood was just starting, back then.
Yeah.
And he came over to the LA, I guess, and he trained and taught Douglas Fairbanks and Will Rogers and a bunch of other guys from back then. Colonel Tim McCoy. There's a big list of names. I wish I had my Henderson book out right now. But he, so they all would order from Henderson because that's who Snowy Baker used, and those are the whips you then see in those movies. I found that really fascinating. Once I learned that tidbit, it was like, oh, you can like trace the lineage of it, you know?
Yeah. That's fascinating. So how did you go about researching that? You said he died in the 60s?
Yeah. I didn't really know anything about him until I read Morgan's book, probably in the late 90s, and I saw that really. You have a copy of that, right? You've seen that?
Yeah, I do. I don't remember that section, but now I'm going to have to go back and find it.
He talks about the Hendersons here or there in the book, but there's a picture. There's 2 or 3 pictures of Henderson whips in that book that are like 36 plat. It's like just beautiful. It just caught my attention. You know, it was like, oh, what is this? Where is this guy? And the caption said from the E.H. Cooley collection. So I remember when I was talking to Morgan, I was like, hey, who's E.H. Cooley? What's the deal with this stuff? Where are those whips? You know? And Henderson said that he was like, I don't know. He's like, they used to be friends. They used to like write back and forth. And it was just this guy that collected a ton of whips, and especially a ton of Henderson whips. And he said he's probably, I don't know, he might have died. He said he lost contact with him in the 80s, I think.
Okay.
And so we just figured like, oh, there's no way to find those specific whips. But I was like kind of grilling him on Henderson. I was like, what information do you have? Can you tell me more about it? So I could like try to go look up and find more stuff about them. And he gave me a bunch of stuff. I've got this big page of notes and stuff from back in the day. And then I think it was like 2 weeks later, I get in the mail a letter from David Morgan, and it was kind of thick. And I was like, oh, what's this about? I open it up, and it is scanned like articles about Henderson from the 1950s that talked all about his family and all this stuff.
Wow.
And had photos of him. And it was the first time I ever saw a picture of what he looked like. And I was just really kind of took me down the road of like, let me research this guy. So I started calling people in whipmakers in Australia, talked to Charlie Hassett about Henderson, talked to just a ton of people in Australia, a lot of the old whipmakers and stuff like that. And just kind of started compiling all this information. And I have this binder that's about this thick with Henderson stuff. I even combed through every issue of the Australian Whipmakers Journal going back to the 80s for any mention about Henderson or any of the guys from back then, like Roxby King and several other whipmakers, you know.
You need to write a book. This is great.
At some point, I guess I gotta. Dan Borton is another one. He was a huge help. If you haven't talked to him yet on this, you should bring him on. One of the most knowledgeable. He's the guy I go to when I don't know something. You know?
Exactly. I've talked to him a few times. Like, I need some specs on like a Catwoman. And he's like, paragraphs.
Yeah. Him and I first started. We became friends because of the Henderson stuff. Because I had found some stuff that he didn't have, and then he sent me stuff that I didn't have, and so we just would share the information. You know. Yeah.
I need to bring him on here. That'd be great.
Yeah, and then essentially at one point, I was like, well, I should share this stuff. So I made a whole section on the website, the old version of the website, with all this Henderson, like the articles I found, pictures of his whips, anything that I could find. And because I'd put that up, years later, I think it was like 2008, maybe, I get this letter in the mail from evidently this old lady, and it said Hendrix whips. And she was like, I'm looking to sell these. My old friend, Bud Cooley, has this collection, and he passed it on to me, and I'm looking to get rid of them or whatever.
Whoa.
So it was like, because I researched that stuff, the thing I originally was trying to find kind of came to me. It was a kind of a weird, kind of cool cosmic thing, you know?
Wow.
So I ended up getting to hold those whips in my hand, you know, like I have one of them from the collection still here.
Oh yes. Let's see that. Hang on. I got to go full screen here.
Unfortunately, though, of all the ones that I wanted to see the most was the 36 plat 12-foot bullwhip.
Yeah.
And evidently that got destroyed in a flood in the 90s.
Oh, man.
But yeah, this is just a 20 plat. I think it's 20 plat. Yeah, 20 plat bullwhip. And unfortunately, I don't know if you can see right there, there's some damage on the thong and on the.
Yeah.
And that's from like some rodent chewed on it.
Oh, man.
Right at the transition, go figure.
Yeah.
But it also has this interesting way that the wrist loop comes out the bottom there.
Oh, that's cool. So
it kind of comes out the centerpiece of the butt cover there.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Slit or something there.
And I've got one other Henderson thing here too. And this was kind of neat. There's a friend of mine who is a whip collector. We actually met because he outbid me on a whip, and I was so angry. I was like, well, if you ever need it repaired, let me know. I just wanted to see it. But later on, he found, just randomly on eBay, there was a couple of these thongs, just a thong by itself, that I think might be like 24 plat, maybe 30, but or 32. But anyway, it's 24 plat and two-tone, and it's like 12 foot long. There was like 3 of these that somebody was selling on an auction. I think he got them for all 3 of them for like $200 or something like that, because they didn't know what it was. He didn't even know what it was. He was just like, that just seems like a good deal, you know? And so he actually had me make a 48 plat handle for it. Wow. And this is the first 48 plat handle I ever made, probably around 2002, 2003, something like that.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at that.
And that's actually based off of another Henderson whip.
I was going to say, the style looks similar. So is this in your collection now? Were you able to hang on to it, or you have to send it on eventually?
I got to talk to him about it. Hopefully I'll end up getting it, but I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was like, hey, you can hang on to it and study it for a while. So.
That's so cool. So, so the Henderson legacy, I guess, continues on in you in many ways, as learned through.
Well, one of the this was when I had the whips with me. I actually made an exact copy when I had the 36 plat Cooley whip. It's probably backwards because of the camera, but it says EH Cooley. And on the back, it had 1959. So I did this in 2009 and put the 2009 instead, sort of like as an homage.
Yeah.
But I had the whip. It was great to have like the actual one hanging there next to me work on this handle so I could match it up exactly, you know.
Wow. No, that is just gorgeous. That
one day I'll finish the rest of it.
I mean, just having that as inspiration and all, I'm sure means a lot to you. Just when you look up at that, what do you think? What do you feel?
There's sort of a connection to the past, you know, and a connection to like, I guess just whip history in general, because it is like this crazy like sort of thing. It's like, you know, Henderson made that whip, you know, probably in the 60s, 50s, probably probably like 50s, and then for it to go and end up being in David Morgan's book, to then not knowing would there be, you know, what happened to them, and then because of the research it did, and and Morgan sending me that article and all this other, you know, this train of events that led to a thing I never thought would happen, you know.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. That connection to history, probably. I know for me, when I'm working on this and when I'm talking to my customers and all, that comes up quite a bit. I mean, whips are not a modern technology here; they're ancient technology.
Yeah,
I definitely feel that as well. Do you feel like that's part of what? I mean, doing things like this, and you share a lot of information with other whip makers. I know tons of people I've talked to. They mention they've asked you questions. Is it important to you to continue sharing and helping others with this journey as well?
Well, one of the biggest things, and I've only been able to kind of relax about it more in the recent years, but I was always, because I watched the whip world dying. You know, that was happening for a while. And then, you know, it's like some of the other greats were retiring or passing away. And it just seemed like it was kind of on its way out. So I was doing everything I could to try to like get it out there and try to like keep it alive. And then strangely enough, because of the pandemic and you doing this podcast and the virtual WhipCon and stuff like that, like suddenly there's this huge interest raised, and there's more and more people growing every day. There's more social media technology and stuff like that. Like to the point that I'm blown away still. Like Tori and I were at the bar, I don't know, like a month or two ago, and somebody randomly was like, "Hey, Paul the Whip guy, like I saw this guy pop up on my feed the other day," or some other guy came up to me. It was like, he's like, "Oh, I'm the Aaron Bonk's biggest fan. Do you know Aaron Bonk?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know, and he's like, "No way." And it's like, these aren't whip people. They're just average people, like regular non-whip people. And it's like, the fact that it's permeating that much shows me that, like, I think it's going to be fine now. I don't have to put as much stress on myself for it, you know?
I think it's finding its own place these days. It's not the same thing it was in a previous generation, and certainly not a couple of generations back. It's very different than that.
Yeah,
but it is finding its own home, and I don't know what that is or what that name of where it is, but I feel it's settling into something.
I mean, just how much things have changed in perspective and stuff too. It's like paracord whips, even like 15 years ago, were like not accepted.
Right? No, they
were like, oh, that's because there wasn't anybody, like, the only people aside from a couple people who had been making paracord whips for a long time. There was only everybody else who was making paracord whips back then were people who like wanted to make whips but didn't want to get into the rawhide because it was way cheaper to start off with paracord. Yeah. But they didn't have any whip making experience, so their whips weren't very good yet, you know. So anybody who had gotten a paracord whip was like, "Oh, paracord whips must suck." And then it took time for it to evolve. Yeah, exactly. And like Nick's video that did a ton.
Yeah,
it's all that different stuff grows.
How have you seen that change? Have you seen nuance of that? How I mean, Nick's video, of course, was a big piece of it, but where have you seen it be more accepted and all?
I don't know if I understand the question.
So where do you see nylon whips becoming more accepted as real whips? Just in your own eyes when you evaluate them personally, or do you see other professionals use them?
Oh, I see overall. It's just like it's essentially it's one of those things. At this point, I think it's not a better or worse thing with comparative and stuff. It's more of like use case. I keep finding that pretty much everything is use case. So it's like, oh, are you going to be a performer? I mean, you're performing on rough surfaces, or you don't know where you're going to be cracking. Maybe you live in the desert and there's no grass. Maybe you're a performer doing a parade and you're cracking on concrete for 2 hours. Like, it's like, okay, well, it'll be a lot less, you know, it'll stand up a little bit better than rawhide would on rough surfaces, abrasive surfaces like that for long periods of time. And if it wears out, it's not as big of a hit to replace, you know?
Right.
So like, there's a great use case for that. There's also use case for beginners and stuff like that. Cause people don't, like, I'm sure you see this all the time, but people don't have the eye yet when they're new to see, they just see a picture and they're like, that looks good. And it's $50. And it's like, yeah, but it's not good. And why is it so much of a difference between that and a good one? And they don't really know what goes into it at first, you know?
Oh, of course.
And until you see a good one next to a cheap one, then that's when I see the light bulb click. Right. Like, oh, that's why, you know, you get a good one.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, getting their hands on like one of your whips, you know, they can see the just like how a perfect taper works and how effortlessly it cracks and all. Yeah, I think that was a huge eye-opening moment for me. We had, I've told the story on the show a few times, but when I was a kid, we had a small farm, and my dad went to the feed store and just got a made in Mexico swivel handle, $20, you know, 4-strand.
Yeah.
Yes. It was, well, I have it hanging on the door over here still, but
I bet it looks just like the one I got from the tack shop back in the day.
I bet it does. And it has had lots done to it.
Yeah.
So I was trying to crack it and it was awful. And, you know, I could probably crack a bath towel just about as easily. But
I almost wonder if that's where some of those beginner bad habits come from, of the big pullback and the over muscling, is because maybe their first whip they used was one of those, and that's the only way you can get one of those to crack, you know?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
So eventually my brother got super excited in Indiana Jones, and he contacted Joe Strain.
Oh, nice.
And he saved up all summer as a 12-year-old or something, and he got him a 10-foot Indy.
Awesome.
From Joe. And later in life, he had to sell it for financial reasons. So,
bummer.
But the difference when I got to crack a Joe Strain was that moment you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an 8-foot, and it's so hard to crack. And you take that 8-foot, and you just kind of get it started, and it does its own thing. It knows what to do.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's something you can't just explain to somebody. You have to feel it to really get it, you know?
Right. So when I started making webs, yeah, it was different.
My first real good one that I bought was a 10-foot Joe strain also. So it's
Really?
it's kind of funny to like, yeah, what the commonality is there.
Right.
And Joe was my early influence. Like he was what I shot after, like what his stuff. It was like the best thing I ever seen. That might even be what got me really starting to pursue it more, to do it like full time, was seeing that. And I just tried so hard to figure out. I couldn't figure out, like, how does he get his transition to stand up that way, that specific way? How does he do this? And I thought he had some special trick and all this stuff, and it was driving me nuts. I was trying to figure out, like, how in the world does he do this? And I guess this is probably like, this might have been like 2001 or something like that, 2002. Okay. Or probably 2001. And I like, so I ended up, I couldn't take it anymore. And I was like, I have to know. And I ended up taking the whip apart. And I both regret it and don't regret it, because I regret it because I can't use the whip anymore. It was so perfect and beautiful and I loved it. But why I don't regret it is because taking it apart taught me that there's no trick. You just have to learn how to do it. Like there was no special binding or anything. I was amazed at how little binding there was in there. And it was just like, he just braided that tight during the train. Like, just have to get good, you know. Yeah. That's the real secret.
And what was that like? You said you talked to Morgan early on as well.
Yeah.
So how did you end up working with Strain and Joe? What? I mean, Joe Strain and David Morgan, and what sort of interaction did you have to train with them, if you will, or how did you learn from them besides just taking it apart? Or
I'd say, well, I wouldn't exactly. I don't know if I call it training exactly. It's more of like just conversations. You know, it's like I'd call up Joe periodically. I'm actually kind of mad at myself because I haven't called him up in a long time. We haven't talked to him in years, but like he, I'd just be asking questions here and there, and I always felt bad about it. I felt like I was always overbugging him, because I actually met him in person in 2001 at the Wild West Arts Club convention, and I just was like just a little puppy dog following him around the whole time, asking him question, like the whole time, and I remember he even tried to like sneak away to this like little secluded section, and I was like, oh, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm going to go replace the falls on a couple of these whips. I was like, can I watch? You know. So I remember later, like, it was probably like after the second or third day, I was down in the like sort of lobby section before you go down to the convention center or up to the hotel. And I was hanging out there at night. It was probably like 1:32 in the morning or something like that, you know. And I see him walking in down the hallway, and I was like, oh, I've bugged him enough. I'll try to leave him alone. So I kind of like turned, so I pretend like I didn't see him, you know. And then he comes up and he taps me on the shoulder, and like we start chatting. He sits down. We didn't even talk. I think we barely talked about whips. We just started talking about all sorts of other stuff, and it was just like, that was just such a really cool moment to like have one of your heroes just be like, yeah, let's just be people together, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's very cool of him.
Yeah, this makes him a real person.
Yeah. I think we talked about he was into like whittling at the time and magic tricks or something. I think he had just bought a magic trick on the strip or something, and we talked a little bit about that. But with Morgan, it was a lot of phone calls. I think we had a little bit of a bond because he saw my interest in the history and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think he got a lot of questions from people for that. And probably most people were just like, "Tell me about the indie whip," you know.
Oh yeah. Was he pretty into the history as well? I mean, did he follow lots of people? That's why he knew so much.
I mean, the notepad, when we had this really long conversation about the Henderson stuff and other history stuff, that I had this notepad, and I was just like, half of it's still indecipherable to me, because there was just so many names and different stuff he was throwing out that I was like, now I go back and look at the pad, and it's just like a random part of a name or something about Sydney, Australia. You know, it's like trying to remember, like, what was he saying about that? You know?
Wow.
I do remember one kind of interesting thing that he was telling me about that was, there's a whipmaker, I think it was George Vogt. And everybody, evidently a bunch of people thought it was like, oh, that guy's a jerk, you know? And he was incredibly nice to me and taught me a bunch of stuff. And evidently what it was he had a brain tumor that I didn't know about. So I guess it was pressing on something. That's what made him like aggro, you know? And then after he got it removed, that's when Morgan had met him. So, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm super. I'd love to show you anything." I was like, "Oh, that's fascinating."
That's about the best excuse I could ever think of.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and also to just learn about the different. I just love the different stories of stuff. There's tons of great stuff in the old APWA journals. I don't know if they're even still able to get any of those since it's not around anymore. But they would, all these old whipmakers would write in talking about stuff, and they'd tell stories. And there's this one story about a whipmaker that it was during like the Depression, I think, in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just like, the story goes, it's like, oh, you could throw a rock in Sydney and hit a whipmaker, and everybody was trying to just like take everybody else's work and stuff like that. And there was this one whipmaker that made these twisted cowtail handles. And I
saw the picture of David in the Morgan book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like everybody was like, how do you do that? And so some competitor of this guy sent his apprentice over, and he hand drilled a hole in the wall to peek through to try to see how he did his cowtail. Like, I just love little details like that. It's like, what a wild time,
Industrial espionage back in the day, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what was it? What is the difference, do you think, between working with Joe Strain versus David Morgan? Because a lot of times it's Joe Strain is the continuation of David Morgan's legacy.
Yeah.
It's how I hear it described. But you knew both people. How do you, they're not the same person, obviously.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely like, Joe, like any indie whipmaker is inspired by Morgan stuff. And the basics are the same of, two belly construction, all that stuff, but it's in the details is where the differences come in. And also Joe, from my understanding, I don't think he actually like went and like studied with Morgan and learned his exact method. It was more, if I remember correctly, I think the story goes, he like had been making whips for a little bit and then went up and visited Morgan for like a day or two. And kind of reminds me of an early day for me where it was like, I was just working on my own. I was like 17 and I didn't know if what I was doing was I'd never talked to another whipmaker at that point. I'd never seen how anybody else did stuff. And there was this whipmaker, Jim Hurlbud, up in Wyoming that offered like a whipmaking class or something like that. So I ended up driving from Missouri all the way up to Wyoming and spent, I think, 2 days there. On his family's farm. I remember it being so cool when I got there too, because it was an actual like cattle ranch farm. Okay. And I get there and Jim's dad comes riding up on a horse with a stock whip on his shoulder. I was like, this is real. How cool is this?
Worth the money already.
Yeah. But essentially it's like what I learned from that was that like we went through and made this stock whip. And I was just like, oh, okay. Basically confirmed for me, like I was on the right track. I wasn't doing anything like completely wrong or something like that. And that's the vibe I get of probably Joe's trip with Morgan, where it was like, oh, okay, cool. Just like confirming and stuff like that, because I kind of see Joe as like a progression of Morgan. So it's like Morgan kind of solidified this style. And then now as you see it progress, it's like, okay, Joe's is a even more like refined version of that. And probably in the future, we'll see an even more refined version,
Right. Yeah. How would you say your work compares? You have influences from so many different people. And your whips are incredible, and I've seen some extremely beautiful work you've done.
Thanks.
Yeah. Do you? Who do you look up to? Do you strive to be as good as, or is there a person that you want to be like?
There was.
Who do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't think I have that anymore. I think for a while I did. It's like I did want to be Joe Strain at one point for a while. And then I also wanted to be able to make a Morgan like I wanted, like be able to make the model I wanted exactly how I wanted it. Like that I strive for since I was a kid, freeze framing with the VHS little sketchy freeze frame, like trying to match up like, okay, here's the details, and, but like, yeah, at this point, I think I'm kind of just, I don't think I'm aspiring to be someone. I'm aspiring to be who I'm becoming, I guess. I don't know. It sounds weird, but like,
no, that makes sense actually.
Yeah. Like I'm more interested in seeing what I end up doing that isn't based off of trying to chase something else,
Sure. And I like how you were saying earlier where you're studying different people's mindset, because I mean, it sounds like you've certainly got all the pieces, and you know how, when you attempt to do something, you know how to make it happen the way you're trying to make it happen. The question is, what do you want to do? So when I try to make a whip, I make plenty of mistakes. My plaiting,
we all do.
It's not straight. I get a twist at the end, and I look at it when I'm all done and it's shellacked. I look at it, and I went over one too many on that halfway down the thong. I'm just like, are you serious?
Well, I saw that nylon whip you had at the LA con. I think it come along great, man.
Oh, well, thank you. I was proud of that. I mean, it does have a twist in it, but it's okay.
That's how you learn and get better, man.
Right,
like every whip you make, you're like, and as the whip maker, you're the one who's tearing it apart the most.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to wait like days before I look at a whip I finished to reassess it without having the fresh, like, well, I wish this bevel was a little bit better. Yeah.
Right. Or inside where that drop strand was, or I mean the broken strand. You know where to look.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I find handing it to somebody else and be like, hey, what do you think? Do you pick out anything, try to critique it. And like, they'll critique stuff I didn't expect, and then they'll miss the stuff I was going, oh, they're definitely going to notice that.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. And then, I mean, you probably see this too with customers that aren't whip experts. Either way, they just, does it make a loud noise? And I mean, it's the customer, but
that was one thing I definitely, when I started off, I basically had two choices. It was like, try to make it look pretty or try to make it work well. And I thought it through and was like, well, if I try to make it pretty, it's going to be harder to learn how to make it work well. But if I start off by trying to make it crack well, the prettiness will come. And I think that's kind of what happened,
Is there anybody that, when you were thinking through that you could focus on and say, these work the way that I want it to work? Was it when you're looking at the Cecil Henderson whips, when you're holding a Joe Strain, or who were other influences that you had back then that you were?
Oh, Janine Fraser was a big influence. We became friends kind of by accident, because it was on the old Whip Enthusiasts. Oh yeah, it was before it was Yahoo Groups. It was an e-group before that, before Yahoo bought it out.
Oh my. Okay.
And there was maybe like 800 people in the group or something. There was some kind of mix up that I had where like I thought I was talking to somebody else when I messaged with her or something. Some kind of mix up that I did. And then I went to call him, and I ended up calling Janine, and didn't even think about the time difference. So when I called Janine, it ended up waking her up at like 4 a.m.
Oh no.
But she rolled with it. We chatted, and then we like set up a time to talk again later. And then we started talking regularly, and she was telling me all about the stuff that she learned from like Fred Jarvis and oh man, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember her whip cracking mentor right now. I can't remember his name, but I think he taught Ben Hughes also.
Okay.
And
wow.
But she would like, her whips like were her, what was her catch Fraser? It was like, oh, let a Fraser whip do the cracking for you.
Oh,
I was like, oh, that's a great tag, But I had never seen any of her work, and we've been talking for a while. And then when I went to that first Wild West Arts Club convention in Vegas, they had a bunch of Joe Strain whips there for sale. They brought their whole shop with them to the convention center, which was great for me because I was just like, I get to see a bazillion whips and get to like soak in all this stuff.
Right.
One of the whole reasons I went too was like, just like there's going to be 200 whip crackers there with whips from whip makers all over the world. I get to like walk around and be like, hey, can I look at your whips?
Exactly.
And just soak in whatever I could. But so she had some whips there, and I since I had started making whips for stage props at that point, I was like, hey, do you mind if I take one of these over there and try it out? And it was sort of after hours, and it was like a cool down time where there was like a band playing. It was supposed to be quiet time, and they were like, oh yeah, if you just go over to the corner and be real quiet about it. And I was like, I just want to feel how it rolls out, And I do the lightest crack ever, and it just goes kaboom and echoes through the whole thing. And then I had Gordy Peer comes walking up to me and like chastises me. You young kids have no respect. And we were cool later, but but it was just a really funny like.
Oh my gosh. I think I felt that way with WhipCon too. I mean, obviously, quiet time there, but just so many different whip makers and whips and people cracking whips, obviously.
Yeah.
You've been involved since the beginning of WhipCon, as I understand it. Back when Adam first setting it up.
It was basically, I think the founders of it was like me, Todd Rex, Matt Franta, Adam and Dakota, and I must be forgetting somebody else. But I think there was no, it had never been done before, so there was no interest. I think I was the one that donated all the whip prizes that year. And then, I even tried to do a thing too where I think I tried live streaming it, but it was too early in the internet, time for the whip world for live streaming. And I think I had some LA friends, I was like, hey, go around and interview people, or something, just gather a bunch of footage. But they didn't know anything about whips, so there wasn't really any good questions. So it didn't end up making a good video, But I was trying to figure out a way to promote it or whatever. But yeah, that was just, it's basically was Adam was coming out to visit because it was his vacation time every year, pretty much.
And in between.
So him and Dakota would come out and be like, oh, let's go out to LA and see Paul and Todd and everybody, And then it was just there hasn't been any, the Wild West Arts Club is no longer, there's no conventions really. This is part of during that dying period, where it just kind of felt like everything was going away. There wasn't really any kind of thing going on. And then it was just oh, why don't we do this thing? Why don't we just put something together? Maybe people show up, whatever,
Yeah. And we had a great turnout this year. And what did you think of it? I mean, this was my first year for going. What did you think compared to previous years, and what are you hoping for it for the future?
I mean, in my pie in the sky dream that I don't know if Adam even wants to do would be to have something like the Wild West Arts Club convention where it's a big, we have an actual place and we have, 500 plus people there, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. I don't know if it's practical,
Yeah. I've talked to him a little bit about some of that, and there's definitely some practical challenges as far as how many people need to be in certain locations and limits with the people at certain venues with the cost and all. So
it's expensive.
It is. But as it continues to resurge in interest, I hope it's a problem we have to tackle and figure out.
Well, I think what I really want to see next is more people around the country starting whether it's an actual con or not, or whether it's just a meetup group or something like that. Right. I mean, that's one of the best ways to keep the whip arts alive is by having people get together, because it's such a solo activity. And whenever you get together with other whip crackers, no matter what skill level, everybody gets better. Everybody gets more into it. You start getting creative. You start playing around with different stuff. It's just the best thing. And plus it's fun to finally be able to talk to somebody else about this niche thing that none of your friends know about or understand.
Yeah. And plus you can invite your friends out about your crazy niche thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to call out some of my friends now. So, I've been talking to Kat Fimple, and she really wants to do something in Vegas again. She wants to do a Viva Las Vegas WhipCon sort of thing. And I have, there's several people here in Fort Worth, Texas, where I am, which is Cowtown. And we have a culture of cattle herding and all here. So that's I know there's at least 3 whip makers in town, one of which is an Australian whip maker that lives here.
Is that Mark Mulligan? I know he used to live in Texas. I don't know if he still does.
Nave. I haven't actually met him in person yet.
Yeah.
But and we have of course myself, and I have 4 or 5 friends that I hang out with from time to time, and I bring over bull whips and we all crack whips. So I'm thinking, okay, so if we get 5 or 8 families plus all their wives and kids, and all of a sudden we've got a nice little meetup.
Yeah.
You get 20,
well, I mean, even if you just go, I mean, really just to start any kind of meetup is just go pick a place that's away from houses and stuff if you can, so you don't bug neighbors and stuff. But just pick a nice little quiet, secluded sort of park or whatever. But and just start going whether it's every week, every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever, and just put it out there, especially now online. Even if it's 3 people regularly, it'll grow, There's been times what's it?
I hope so. And here in Fort Worth, there's it's not weird. It's something that it's something that that we're in Texas. Whips are not strange. It might be annoying if you're cracking them near people, obviously. But it's not. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Whips. That's a thing here.
Yeah.
And some people will come up and ask questions, and
that's how it just gets more interest. I mean, it's a great thing to do, because like especially like when I started out pre-internet and stuff, it was like I didn't know of any whip people within a 500-mile radius. Like that's why I went to the Vegas con, because it was like, well, hey, there's going to be people there that do whip stuff. And it's ironic that I had to fly, a couple thousand miles to end up meeting Chris Camp, who lived an hour away from me. Like, I had no idea. So, and then we were like, hey, let's put together a thing in St. Louis. And we put together, I didn't come up with the name. It was like somebody else did. It was the St. Louis Whipnic, like Whip Picnic.
Okay.
And we did the first one, and we ended up, I think there's still, it's probably one of the first videos on my YouTube, I think, was like a little 10-second clip of people out in the park. But I think throughout that day, we had at least 50 or 60 people come and go throughout the day. And I was like, where have all these people been?
Right.
Like, they'll come out of the woodwork if you just start doing a thing,
Right. Yeah. We have a big park down here, and I was just wondering, like, wonder what would happen. Like, what if? And I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to say it publicly here. We're going to do a meetup here in Fort Worth, Texas.
Everybody show up.
Everybody show up. I'll post dates when it gets close. But actually,
I like regularity and consistency, I think is the big thing with it. Cause it's like, sometimes people have, I got to work that weekend or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we can do it like once a month or something. I don't know how the WhipCon is in LA, obviously, is annual. So that's it feels like a lot of pressure to both make it, as well as once you're there, you just want to get as much as you can out of it, and then don't waste any of your time. And
there's never enough time.
Right. Exactly. Versus if you had something happening more regularly, it wouldn't feel, I don't want to say as much pressure, but you could get people into it as a more regular part of their life, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a more casual setting where you just kind of hang out, and goof around and try different things. And
right.
I mean, that's where, because like pre-LA WhipCon, that was something that I think Matt Franta started it before I moved here, where it was just like, you just go to the park once every 2 weeks, I think it was, and people would come sometimes people wouldn't. Sometimes it'd just be him there, but and then slowly it's grown, and we still do it regularly. Even though I think Matt moved at this point, but like Todd would go regularly. I used to go regularly, although I've been so busy, I haven't been able to go much lately. But it's just like, you can every 2 weeks you can just go there.
Yeah.
And sometimes see the same people, sometimes see new people, different people, sometimes see somebody you haven't seen in a long time.
I saw Torrance posted he was going to do a meetup over there near you somewhere, and he was talking about a new game, like
his field day thing. Yeah.
His field day thing, to where like one person does one crack, the next person does that crack plus one more, and you keep going around. Kind of like
it's all just like games that's the fun part about whip stuff. Right. I mean, that's where
it's so much fun.
That's where the Bullwhip Fast Draw came from. That was it was Jerry Deere, me, and a guy named Chris Curtis in Ohio.
Okay.
And whenever I'd go out for Annie Oakley days, or I'd go out and visit Jerry for a little bit or something, we'd spend hours just playing games for fun. And like, we used to do this one thing in his barn where I think we went till like 2 a.m. once when he had to work in the morning, but we just were so into it, where he had this candelabra, and it was like 6 candles and then one taller one in the center. So we just stood on either side, went 1, 2, 3, go, and whoever got to the center one first won. Didn't matter who won. We're just immediately like, set it up again. Let's do it. It's just so fun,
That's awesome.
So after the Annie Oakley days, one day we were like packing up, and the three of us were just messing around with and essentially doing what the fast draw is. And same kind of thing. It was just like, just set it up again. Doesn't matter who won. Let's just keep going. This is so fun. And then we were like, why don't we put that in as a contest and the thing? And it was so crazy cool to see, because it didn't matter what your skill level was. It's kind of anybody's game, There was like a 12-year-old who had just started cracking whips that day that beat a guy who had been cracking whips for 20 years. It was one of those kind of crazy. So it kind of levels the playing field a bit, and it's just fun,
Wow. Yeah, it really is. And I'm hoping those sort of things we can incorporate more in whenever we do these meetups and LA WhipCon, of course. But I think as we get more people coming in, we can settle into this, whatever the new niche is that whip cracking is. We can get people to treat it like disc golf or something. It's just a fun thing to get out with your friends and do in the park, and we all
and challenge your skills and stuff. I mean, it, in a way, I was a skateboarder back in the day, and it kind of reminds me of the skateboarding world in a way, where it's like, yeah, you just go out. You're still solitarily doing the thing and challenging yourself, but you go out with friends and you can have fun with it and play with it, and it just that there's a community with it, even though it is such a solitary thing, you know?
Right. I mean, it's very similar to skateboard because if you screw up, you end up with welts and bruises. So.
Well, and also just the progression of like tricks and stuff. You know, it's like, I mean, before, I'm sure somebody's done it before Adam, but as far as I know, Adam started the can cutting thing. You know, and I don't remember seeing anybody do that before that. You know, and also too, like when I started off and went to my first convention, it was like, you were considered really good if you could just stand there and hold two whips. You know, it's like now you've got people who are like, you know, you got the young kids who are going, you know, got Ian going crazy and stuff. And it's like,
goodness.
Nobody could do that back then. The only people who were even close to doing that was like when like Mike Murphy came over or Fiona Wilkes or something, you know?
Right.
And even then, at this point, the modern two-handed whip cracking is light years past that already. So
yeah, it's continuing to evolve. Do you feel like as a whip maker, you're having to evolve to keep up with anything that as people are evolving like that with the new crazy tricks?
I mean, I guess since I always had like a versatile set of skills, I don't think I've had to change that much because I was always trying to target it to like, what is this used for? You know,
good point.
In these cases. So like, but I mean, there is some where like we've learned more and have words now more for stuff like that whole conversation about the lance shaped taper and stuff like that. It's like,
oh sure,
people never really thought about it in that way before,
or whatever,
and that gave like a term for it and a concept to it. And like my Australian model is based off of that because that's essentially that taper is very Jack-alike, like a lot of Jack's tapers like that. Whereas like a Morgan or a Strain kind of taper is more of like a straight taper.
Right.
So and they have two different use cases. That's where like I think that's why that kind of taper and Jack whips are really suited for or tend to be really suited for Delonja style stuff. It works really well for that. Like my favorite, one of my go-to whips is my prototype of the Australian, and that was based off of. I talked with Delonja and we kind of worked together a little bit on designing it. But this thing is the first thing I pull out to do body wraps, cut targets, or anything like that. And this was I think the second prototype. And I don't know if the camera will be able to pick up like the taper in it, but you know, it comes down fairly faster, and then it's a slower taper past that. Versus like say this indie one, it's more of a straight taper.
I see. Okay.
And it's just that little subtle difference, and and that's the other thing too. Some of these like use cases of specifically this or that, it's like it depends on the person's skill level who's using it too. You know, so they might not need something that has this kind of specific taper if they don't even have the skill ability to like tell the difference, you know?
Yeah.
So they're not going to be using it in a more finesse way. They might be using it in more big swings and stuff like that.
So I guess you modify that with like where the bellies end and how far out you bring the tails. And do you have like, for this model, I always do this, or do you talk to each customer and see how they're going to use it?
A lot of the time it's just, this is the model, you know? But then unless it's like somebody who is wanting something for some specific who will like request that, then I got to like talk to them about it and try to understand what they're doing, or maybe have them send me a video of them cracking, so that, because that's such an important thing as a whip maker, is to be at least a decent enough whip cracker to where you can feel like you can actually, like the thing you're making, you can actually understand how it's being used and feel how it's being used.
Yeah. I was talking to, I think it was Adam a couple of years ago about that, and he actually used Torrance as an example of how his whip making has gotten so much better as his whip cracking has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a direct correlation to both of them.
100%.
And I know he's worked with you quite a bit. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, we work together sometimes, and I mean, he lives 2 buildings down from me, so we'll play chess on the weekends or whatever, And man, like, talk about somebody like, this is what I really see of like who's got like who has passion for this thing, because it's not just about like, oh, I want to do this because it's cool. It's like also like you just can't stop thinking about it. You have to understand it, and it's at the point where like him and I will be talking about whip stuff. And at a certain point, I'm like, okay, dude, you got to give me a break. Like, you're talking about it even more than I want to. Like, and he's just like, yeah, but what if you do the blah, blah, blah? And I was like, okay, just give me like 5 minutes,
Right. Nah, he's so passionate about it. That's part of the thing I love about him.
Yeah.
He came to visit me a while back when he did his whirlwind tour across the country right before COVID.
That, yeah.
And came in and like shook his hand. I'm like, hey, it's good to see you. He's like, yeah, good to see you. So where's the whips? Like literally that was the conversation. He's so excited about it.
Adam.
Yeah.
When him and I first met, I think that was 2004 or something like that. And it's just like he would come periodically, like he'd come and visit, and he'd like stay at my mom's house with me for like a few days or a week or something like that. And or like when he was coming back from an event or something, he would stop by. And there's just we had so many like fun arguments about, well, why'd you do it this way? I would do it this way. Oh, that's a cool no, I would rather do it this way. Like, and just messing around with stuff like and that was at the beginning of him starting to get into performing too, because I remember, I think there's a video again, one of the first YouTube videos I posted is him in my mom's backyard. I think it's titled something like Adam Winrich two-handed whip performance or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's your mom's backyard. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You can hear the air conditioner running outside.
I know exactly.
But yeah, in that video, that was him starting to learn, because he had learned all the technical side of it, but he hadn't really learned like showmanship or performance side. And that's where like in the video he's doing all this cool two-hand stuff, and it was like he had just learned like, oh, you got to take a break in there or do something performance-y. And so he like at one point he's doing the two-hand and then puts the 2 whips together and just swings them around and points at him and makes a goofy face and then goes back into it. And it was just like, that was all like the very start of all that stuff, He's
starting to learn how to do it. And
I mean, and now look at him, it's crazy cool. Look how far he's come. As a friend, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of him.
No, I certainly understand. And I mean, Adam and Torrance and guys, when you listen to this, we love you. And that is exactly why we're so excited about this. I'm certainly not nitpicking your personality. I love how passionate these guys are.
Yeah.
And I had both of them on the show, and I want to have them both on again at some point. That, I think it's people like that will continue to move both the art of whip cracking and whip making forward. And
yeah.
Has some really unique designs with some of the open lattice work that he does and things like that.
That's where we're seeing stuff progress. That's the whip making equivalent in my mind of, or the whip cracking equivalent in my mind to that is like, it was like, okay, Todd started really progressing tosses.
That's exactly what I was going to go with. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from that, then Aaron Bonk starts doing juggling. Which is like an extension of tosses. And now he's doing multiple whip juggling, and now there's actually a juggling style of whip. Like that's how stuff progresses,
Right.
Like, it's just somebody going, I just like doing this. Like, because I remember early on with Todd, I was like, dude, it's like, you should like learn some of these Australian routines and go to Australian compete. And he's like, I don't want to learn that stuff. I mean, he was like he didn't have the focus for that, because he was just like, I just want to do stuff that I've come up with and feel like, and that's where he'd come up with the tosses and the backflip stuff, and it's just incredible,
Yeah, it is. And I mean, he's one of those guys that also just so passionate about it, and it's like he's not. I don't know. He doesn't care what other people think. Maybe it's kind of a part of it, but he also
he seems like he doesn't. But I bet he does a little bit.
He's a great showman as well. I think part of that is working in Hollywood. He knows how to find his sight line and make it.
Yeah. Well, he's got such a creative brain. I mean, because it is really funny.
He's an artist.
It's so funny how like a lot of whip people don't know how many big movies that he's like sculpted stuff for, and like done all this crazy cool art, and then all these people that know him from that world have no idea how awesome he is at the whip. It just cracks me up. It's like, and then also I think he was a stuntman for a little while back in the day.
I think
which
so,
is where some of the like backflip stuff comes from and all that.
Right.
So it's just like just an incredibly like just a fascinating, super nice, awesome person. You know?
Right. He really is. And just to continue talking about WhipCon a little bit more, did you see the gift that Johnny Ogren and Torrance got him?
Yeah, Johnny told me about that ahead of time. Yeah, that's hilarious.
So for those that don't know, Isaac Eliason has a video on his coverage on Eliason Whips, on the coverage of WhipCon, but he has a video of it. So like we were just talking about, Todd tosses the whip in the air. That's one of his main things. Lots of different interesting tosses and catches, and does things with the whip in the air. So Johnny and Torrance got together and they made a whip with a Velcro handle and a glove with the matching Velcro on it. And they handed him the glove and he didn't know what it was for. Then they handed him the whip and then it was stuck.
What they call it, like the anti-whip toss whip or something like that.
Just level the playing field, they were saying. And then Todd had this look. He just like did straight to the camera. That was, yeah, it's so good. Definitely worth everybody checking out for sure. I love this community, and that's part of why I do this show, is to talk about all these fun things we've done together and fun people like this.
Well, I'm so glad that you do it too, because it's like it's something that it's one of those things where I've been like, this is the kind of stuff that the whip world needs, because the whip world is kind of it's been like whips have been around for a long time, but it's still pretty young in a community sort of way, like compared to like the knife throwing community or the flow arts community or something like that. There's a lot more like organized or set stuff, and the whip world is a lot more like a bunch of people doing it separately kind of thing, you know?
Right. And I think we just have to figure out our
I think it's going there.
Yeah.
It's going there. But stuff like this is what helps with that, because there's so many new people coming in that they probably don't know who half the people that we're talking about are.
Right.
And they will pretty quickly, but at first they're just like, everybody starts off with, I know nothing.
Yeah.
And then when they do searches online, there's not a concise spot, so they'll read stuff from here. That's where sometimes you get the misinformation sort of stuff, where it's like somebody read something from something and then tries to regurgitate it somewhere else without understanding it fully, and then it turns into almost like that, what was that, the telephone game back when you were a kid?
Right.
You know, where it's just like, oh, it's what they said kind of, but it's not exactly right, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I was looking over my notes here, and one thing that has changed recently that you were in the middle of, or maybe at the point of the spear, is the performance hybrid whip. We didn't even cover that. Like, that's been a huge change. I probably, I don't know, a quarter of the whips I have that I own around here hanging on my wall and stuff are performance hybrid of one sort or another.
I never expected it to become like, I guess, considered a specific new whip model. And it's like I didn't like invented the BBC handle thing and all that. That was a guy. Oh, why is my brain? Shoot, I can't think of his name right now.
And you for the history, man.
I know. I can find it. No,
yeah.
I'll just start talking and then I'll remember it. But so it was this guy in Florida. I think he was pretty young at the time.
Okay.
And you know, they had the Florida cow whip is really popular down there, as well as using paracord for the thong. So he instead of like turning wood handles and stuff, I think that's where he came up with I'm going to try using a PVC handle, and also instead of the thong hanging out so much of the cup, it was a little bit more in there. And I think he called it just generally like a hybrid. And then I think that's what he called it, or I could be mistaken. But so I was he was just starting to, what was it? Oh yeah, so it was this one performer, John Bailey. I remember his name, but not the other guy's name. I'm friends with the guy on Facebook. So I had to ordered a pair from him to check them out, because John Bailey showed them to Chris Camp, and Chris Camp got a pair. And then when Chris Camp came to visit me, he was like, "Hey, check these out. I got these for performance, especially for like cracking on the street and stuff like that, in concrete for a lot of his shows."
Okay.
And I tried it. It was the first time I had tried a paracord whip that I was like, "Hey, this ain't bad," you know. So I was actually going to start buying them from him to sell. And then that guy just fell off the face of the earth at some point. And I never found out what the story was, but evidently he's back around again because I've seen him on Facebook recently. And but yeah, so that happened. It was like couldn't get a hold of him anymore, and nobody heard from him. So then it was like me and my girlfriend at the time. We were like, well, let's try messing around with it. And then we kind of like tweaked the design a little bit more in ways that we wanted it. And oh yeah, and it was also when I had moved out to Nevada. So we didn't have grass spots to crack, so it was all dirt and stuff, and I didn't want to get my rawhides messed up. So it was like, okay, well, if nothing else, we'll just make ourselves some to use, you know. And then we were like, okay, well, let's start off for them. And what do we call it? And I remember writing out a long list of like names for it. That hey buddy, a long list of names, trying to figure out like what we'll call it, you know. And then we ended up settling on the Performance Hybrid, and then because we were like, oh yeah, then you can call it PH Whip for short, you know.
Right.
And then
really,
and then all of a sudden people started. Well, at first it was a battle because people were like, oh, nylon's so good, nylon's so good. So we started posting up videos of using Performance Hybrids to show like, see, here's what you can do with it, you know. And then that sort of like opened it up a little bit more. People were like, okay, well, maybe they're not that bad. Let me give it a try. And then all of a sudden there started to be all these other people starting to make them. And I think at one point some people started calling them pipe whips and some other stuff, but Performance Hybrid just stuck. I mean, it's crazy to see now where it's just like, that's probably one of the most popular whips now. Yeah, like, who would have thought? So. You never know, you know?
I mean, it's so accessible with the lower cost as well.
Yeah.
You can get a very functional whip, and you see performers using it. I think that's another part is that.
And that's where the word performance came in for Performance, right? Because our like intention was for performers.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I think Adam uses something. Well, I think he has some of these as well as he has his bull whips he uses.
I think if I remember right, I remember Adam coming to visit around that time when we were doing that. And I think he might have made his first Performance Hybrid at my place.
Wow.
I remember waking up one day and he's like, already was in the shop and he like came out and he's got this finished hybrid and he was like, hey, sorry, I used some of your paracords.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I'm just looking on your website here. I'm sharing the screen so people can see what Performance Hybrid is for other new people. If you're joining, this is a Performance Hybrid from WhipWhips.
Oh, and another thing on there too, and that I'm really proud of the Little Snapper series. I think that's really cool.
That is awesome. I want to get one of these from you. I need to talk to you after.
You know what's really hilarious? Several times I've been asked. I'm just looking at the picture there. Several times I've had people be like, "Oh, I didn't expect it to be that small." I'm like, literally, it's called Mini Whip, Little Snapper. The top picture on the website is with a playing card for someone else.
Exactly. It's absolutely tiny.
I mean, that only happens every once in a while, but it always kind of makes me laugh when I get an email like that.
No,
those things are great because you just keep them in your pocket. The amount of like wild times I've had just having one in my pocket, because you meet someone and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's like, "Oh, whips," and they're like, "I don't get it. I can pull one out and do a trick real quick." You know?
Yeah.
And it led to stuff where, like, I think I've got a video somewhere on my Instagram or something where Donald Faison, I ended up getting to meet him, and
here as well.
And I ended up giving him I gave him a little snapper, and the video is of him cracking it for the first time in the studio lot. And he just was like lit up like a kid at Christmas because he's a big Indiana Jones fan, you know.
No, yeah, here's several right here. No, I love those, and I've saw several people using them out at WhipCon, and lots of people talking about them as well.
Oh, cool. And, yeah, I mean that's one of those that I'm like weirdly, well, I mean not weirdly, but I just like for some reason I just find myself like really proud of that. It was like a full concept put together that came from actually original, like kind of part of the concept originally came from somebody from probably about 10 years before I even started making these, where there's somebody I knew back in St. Louis who just like challenged me. They're like, "Can you make a rawhide whip for under $100?" And I was like, "I don't think so." So I was, for years, it just like floated in the back of my head, like, is there any way? You know? And then I was making hat band whips for Western stage props. And then what if I just tweak it and try to tweak it for a taper and stuff like that? And then I wonder if that would work. And then I did that, and I was like, oh, this solved like 8 problems, you know?
So how does this compare to a hat band whip? I have one from Blake Gorey, actually, a hat band whip.
Oh yeah, it's basically pretty similar. It's like because the hat band whips that I used to make for stage props had like essentially the ring knot held it went around the thong as well, so you could slide the size.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and also those hat bands didn't focus on taper or anything because they didn't need to crack.
Right.
So it was like, okay, let's make it with a little bit better of a taper. Let me grab my Persil in here.
Yeah, here, I'll switch back to your screen. This way.
Yeah. This is actually made from rawhide I got from David Morgan for the movie The Rundown, which we ended up never using. So I ended up using the hide for other stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, so I kind of put it into more of a taper there.
Yeah, look at that. Nice even taper too. So that's more of a kind of like indie style.
Throw a little blue in there for fun.
Yeah, look at that.
But I just love how like just easily just have it in your pocket, you know?
Yeah. And you can just crack it.
Yeah. I still have people sometimes that I'll run into like at the bar or something. They'll be like, "Hey, you remember me cut a cigarette out of my mouth in the parking lot here once?" I'm like, "That's happened 1,000 times, man." Like I don't remember that specific time.
Like that's not nearly specific enough. Like,
yeah.
Do you only focus on the rawhide? You mentioned about that. I've had people, especially here in Cowtown, ask for whips made out of cow leather, which is really difficult to work with. Do you get weird requests like that, or other make it out of snakes?
Requests at times, but I most of the time I don't want to do it. Yeah, like once you work with rawhide compared to the other leathers, it's like because there's always this common conception of like, I remember there being a time period where everybody was going for this thing where it was, hey, can you make me a whip that has cowhide interior with rawhide exterior, thinking that it'll cost half the price for the whip.
Oh.
And it's like the difference in cost of the material is not much, not enough to bring it down to it's maybe like $40 or something. Yeah. Right. And then when you put on top of that how much more difficult it is to work with the cowhide, it's actually the same amount of work or more. So it's just like not worth it, you know?
Yeah. It's so much more work. I've made, the last one I accepted. I quoted him like $100 more than I normally would charge because I didn't want to do it. He said, fine. I'm like, okay. And it was so crumbly and stretchy and so many strands broke. And when I went to crack it, felt like I was bounced, you know, just it didn't feel right. But he loved it and he hung it on his wall, I'm sure, and he's happy with it.
That's an important thing. If he's happy with it, then right on. Yeah. You know.
And it was important to him as a cattleman to have that sort of whip.
Okay.
So it was a nice 12 strand. It looks great, but functions.
I mean, if somebody wants, I mean, it's my only problem with it is if you want it, like if there was a reason that it made the whip better, or that it had some kind of different kind of handling characteristic or performance difference, then it might be worth doing. But if it's literally just trying to like shave cost, it's like that's not a good reason, you know.
I mean, for him, he was willing to spend more money on it, even if it was a whip, just because, like I said, he was a cow guy, and that's where he got his money and stuff, I guess.
Well, and there's stuff too. Is like if that's just what he wants, because that's what he wants, and like you said, he was even willing to pay more for the extra work. Then like right on, like because there's times when like I'll have people want a whip repaired, and it's, I mean, from my perspective, it's a really kind of it's a nothing whip, you know?
Yeah.
But it was one that their grandfather gave to their dad, that gave to them, so it means something to them. So it's like, okay, that's a good reason to like take care of it, you know, and stuff. But versus like, you know, other reasons. You know?
Yeah. Man, we could chat all night about this. I love talking shop on this sort of thing.
Me too.
Let me see. I've got several notes I wrote down. We could go all kinds of different directions. I know you've seen the industry change, and do Oh, you mentioned several things that you felt like you were personally responsible for helping the industry have different directions, different details in whip making. What are some of those points that you feel like you were, if not the first, maybe you were inventing the same solution as someone else? Those sort of moments.
Oh, I think that kind of stuff happens all the time. Because there is, like, you know, with it being the internet's pretty new, and there's, you know, whip making's been around. Like, you know, that Henderson thong that I had back there, that was probably made in the 20s. You know, so it's like we're talking 100 years, and they were doing stuff that, you know, some of those guys were doing that kind of stuff. So it's like there was the doing the initials in the butt knot. As far as I'm aware, I'm the first one to do that, but I also don't want to really claim that, because I'm like, there's probably some guy in Australia who did it 80 years ago. You know, like I don't know.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I'm actually
surprising some of the stuff, like something like that, where like when I first put that out, I was like, oh, this is going to go wild. Like, people are going to love this. And like hardly anybody's ever talked about it. And then there's other stuff where you're like, oh, I'll just do this thing, and who cares? And then everybody runs with that, and you're like, oh, you just never know what you put out there, how it's going to like trickle, you know?
Right.
I mean, like Todd with the tosses to the juggling, like he didn't know that would lead to that.
Right. But yet it's picked up so much. I really like what you've done here in the heel knot, and I've been trying to figure out how exactly you did that. So,
well, it's neat that I've seen. I'm not saying it came from me, but it is just neat to see, like, now there's more like interwoven stuff in whips. Like, what was it? Recent whip by, was it Thorndike or Chris Barr, one of the two? Which, by the way, you should get a Thorndike on here for sure. And Chris Barr, I don't know if he'd be down there.
Both of those guys on for sure.
But you see more interwoven stuff, and that's sort of how that's done. But my favorite one, actually, I think it's on that Facebook group, our page, whatever. It's the red whip with the JJ. I just love the way that looks on that one. That one was for Darren Wilkerson, by the one that was just up there.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Just the way that it sets in there just looks so good.
Yeah, it does. Look at that.
And that was actually for a friend of mine that he was probably one of the first friends I made online with whip stuff. Jim Gerald, very cool guy.
Well, he got an awesome whip. Look at that.
Oh, and that whip was based off of, and sort of the kind of general taper and shape was based off of that Henderson that I showed earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but that must have been an excellent whip then.
Oh, and that black whip in the middle there, to the left of the JJ one, can't see the whole thing, but that is another recreation of that 48 Plat Henderson. Same handle pattern as the one I showed you here.
Wow. One of these days, I'm going to have to get you to make me one of those.
That's probably the nicest whip I ever made, I think, in general.
Oh, wow.
Or fanciest, I guess, in a way that I was like most proud of. I still get people who comment and compliment on that. Like, I think Gory repaired it recently, like the fall hitch or something. And he was measuring me with just like, oh my God, man, this is crazy cool.
Very cool. Very cool. It's neat to see that you've been at the forefront of some of these awesome things, or bringing them back out, as the case may be.
Well, there's different stuff too, where it's like, I find it important to study the past kind of stuff too. Oh, that's the handle from earlier. Because there's stuff that has been done where it's just maybe people didn't know about it because there was pre-internet and stuff. Like
right.
Have you ever seen the around the corner cut that I do?
Yes, I've seen the video of. I think it was a cigarette, actually.
Oh, I might have.
Or they were paper, maybe something. But yeah, what's the trick to doing that?
That one came from, as far as I know, I think it's only like me, Chris Camp, and the guy that taught us how to do it. His name was Mark the Whip. He used to go to the conventions in Vegas all the time. And it came from some of the there's stories of like the old performers from back in the early 1900s where they would like there was supposedly some performer who would like ask people in the audience like their initials, and then have his assistant hold out a piece of paper, and he would like cut their initials into the newspaper.
Whoa.
So that's kind of where, like, I guess the concept sort of came from, of trying to change the direction of the whip mid crack.
Wow. That is it. Like you have to like twist the bullwhip. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to like at a very specific spot, like as you're cracking, you have to twist it So it ripples down the thong, so it comes down and then almost makes a 90-degree turn.
Wow.
But you have to time it just right. It's really like it's I don't do it that often because like other targeting stuff, I can just boom, one try, not even think about it. But that one, it's like, especially with, you can't see in front of the person, so you don't want to clip their nose or anything or accidentally.
Yeah.
So it's like real difficult.
Whew. Do you find targeting to be some of the more fun stuff that you do with cracking? We've talked so much about making stuff here.
Yeah, I think at this point, yeah. Like I was thinking about it not too long ago, and I was like, oh, I guess, like, where's my spot? Like, because when I was younger, I was more of the two-handed guy.
Okay.
Because that was before many people were doing two-handed, and I had like done so much work, like talking. I used to had so much fun calling Australia to talk to whip people and stuff. And like, I remember Janine. This blew me away when I was first learning the crossovers. She had me on the phone, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I can quite get it. And she's like, here, put the phone down. And she listened to me doing it and went, oh, your left arm's not high enough over here. You know, like, how in the world?
It's not exactly FaceTime, but she knew it. Oh,
because she knew it so well and knew the rhythm, and she'd been coached by oh man, I'm name forgetting like crazy today. But either way, so it was just like that blew my mind. But where was I getting at with that? Oh yeah, so I thought I was gonna be a two-handed guy because I started placing in the competitions and stuff, and then but now like I'm realizing like everybody's just gotten so good, and I don't have the time to practice like that anymore. I haven't been able to in a long while, so it's like, yeah, I think I'm more of a target guy now. You know, like that is where I find more fun. It's more in the moment fun for me, I think.
yeah.
It's like not that long ago at the whip meetup, I think it was Brian. He was just like, do you think I was playing around with Tori's 22-footer, and he was like, you think you can hit this peanut? And I was like, I don't know, I never tried. And he set it up on the stand and bam, and hit it first try. I was like, I didn't even know I could do that. You know, like that's the fun part for me, like finding out what I can do. Yeah.
See, that's the kind of thing that'd be fun at a local meetup. Somebody drag out a whip like that, and nobody else does it very often. No, that'd be so much fun.
I used to try to keep a long whip on me, like in my collection, but like I just never use it, so I ended up getting rid of them. But just nowadays there's always somebody that has a long whip at an event or a get together. So,
is there any tips you could give for getting better at targeting, or what if people want to? Because I'm kind of suck at it.
I mean, it's like I said, in basic ways, it's like, it is very much keeping things in line, just getting really comfortable with it, and also being able to see exactly where it cracks. Like I think because I've just been doing it so long, I didn't really think about how that's difficult for people to see. Mm-hmm. And also understanding too, like different ways and stuff. Like if I'm having somebody hold something, there's a couple of tricks of like to keep safety in mind. And I think it comes from old vaudeville stuff where it's like, if you're have somebody holding the target, you don't want them to hold it like this. You want to have like the fingertips. So if you do kind of brush it, it'll brush down your fingers and less likely to like catch and actually hurt or like do damage to it. And also too, like that's part of using, you could cut stuff people can cut cans, but when you're having somebody hold it, you want to take away any possibility of hurting that person. Right. So you use a softer target like a pasta or styrofoam or a cigarette or something like that, and also you crack above it and let it drop. So that way you can also, you're taking away the danger of it, just like wrapping somebody, so that way you're not cracking right on it to where if you miss and you crack right on their finger and cut it open.
Yeah.
But it's I guess maybe the main thing for just general targeting is just practice.
Some of my favorite videos to watch of whip cracking is actually by a friend of mine, Keith Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Keith does. I love his creativity. And I think that's a great example of how whips are kind of changing. We're settling into this new era, because that's not like anything I've seen before. And
it's become more, we're getting more creativity stuff where it's like, for a while it was always just like, oh, well, learn the thing that came before, which is important, but there wasn't a lot pushing forward until like the Australian stuff started coming over, largely because of Mike Murphy's videos that he came out with. Okay. Like nobody in the US had really seen that stuff, Right. Before that time, the only videos for whip cracking to learn was the Whip Cracking Made Easy, Mark Allen and Alex Green.
Oh yeah.
And then the DeLongis video. And both of those videos are very much just based on sort of like these 5 really beginner basic cracks. So people hadn't really seen like, here's what you can do, you know? Like, here's how crazy creative you can get with it.
Wow.
But now you see how like crazy.
Right, you do. And it's so easy to do like pretty cool video editing stuff.
Yeah.
Like just record it with your phone, then say, make a video, and add an explosion here. And
well, that's what I'm looking forward to probably seeing more of as time goes on. Here, buddy. It's because of the technology and being able to use it and do cool video editing and stuff. Like, I think we'll see a lot more like entertainment based video. Like, again, bring it back like the skateboarding equation. It's like, I remember when like skateboarding videos came out, and it was all about like, how do you edit it? How do you edit in beat with music? How do you transition between the stuff and to make it more visual? Like, where you'd sit there and you'd just be watching people do trick after trick after trick. But it became really interesting instead of just looking at it technically, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Like Todd does great stuff with that. He
does. And it feels like a cohesive entertainment package when you see him do a series of stuff.
Yeah. I like to see more of that stuff. And like Ian Cameron's doing some really cool stuff.
He is. And I don't know if you saw the latest episode with him. It came out today, which is the day we're recording.
I haven't got to watch it yet, though. If it just came out today.
And he was talking about wanting. He's doing a lot of technical stuff, and so he shows how to do something, and then the video just ends. He's doing the short form, but he wants to add more of his. He actively is hoping to add more of his own personality into the routines and into the videos, and I think previous generations that wouldn't. Well, there wasn't a place to do that, first of all, but you would go do your thing in front of a crowd, or you couldn't be the crowd person. Like, it's just one or the other. And now he's really able to move into that, or is looking to, which is.
I think also just in general society where we've become more adept to creative side of stuff. Like, everybody's seen so many movies, more than any generations in the history of time before us has seen more movies, more editing techniques, whether they're aware of it or not. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
There's going to be a lot more of like, whoa, that really is cool. You know, oh, we can have a lot of fun with this.
You don't have to be in a cinema degree or whatever they call it. You don't have to go to film school to see all these editing techniques. You just go to the movies and you can see lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, watch the Super Bowl. You see tons of cool stuff.
Exactly. Well, and I like the idea of seeing more and more. I mean, that's what will help the whip world grow a lot too, is having more stuff where it is. So the average person can like enjoy it and understand it without having to be a whip nerd, you know?
Yeah. Quite right. Do you think there's going to be other, I want to say technology, but other thingies to add into, to mix with whips to make it more of a mixed media? So I saw a video posted, and I forgot his name. Oh my goodness. He has the Circus Crack Facebook page, but he posted how to make an LED whip.
Oh, yeah, that's a prime example of a technology thing. Yeah,
right. And I think that's really interesting, and I'm curious to see, because that feels a lot like the early paracord whips. Like it does the job, but it's a little rough. I mean, he's figured out this clear heat shrink tubing to put over it, and he figured out this fiber optic stuff that you put down the middle of it. So he buys this other, buys something half pre-made, changes it into make it more like a real whip, then he puts a fall and a cracker on it, that kind of stuff. Heat gamble.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I believe that too. It was. I apologize.
Great equation on that though. It is like the early paracord days for that kind of thing, where it's like, and that seems like it fits very much in like the flow arts community and stuff like that.
Right.
Where just like fire whips kind of really took off, aside from like Adam Show and a couple others, like in the flow arts, so they really took that because they already do fire prop toys and stuff all the time.
Sure.
Toy and all that other stuff. So like, so of course, naturally that would be where that would fit, and maybe that's the case for this. Maybe it's something totally we can't predict. Who knows?
Yep. I've got it on my to-do list to make a video on UV reactive paracord. because that's another way of doing it. And I've got actually several on these rolls here behind me.
I dabbled with that back in the day.
And it's really fun to see which ones do what and how you can have it light up different patterns, light different ways and stuff. So
and that's great for a performer, like, because there's some like I don't know, would it be called nightclub shows or something like that, where they have like UV lights and stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, that would look so great in a performance, And
you don't have to worry about batteries. You don't have to worry about things lighting on fire. You just set up your UV lights.
I've always wanted to make a joke video where like for, I don't know, April Fool or something, where it's like take the whip out and you go out and crack it, and it's just like, oh, just finish the whip and go and crack it, but cut the sound so you don't hear the crack sound, and then go, oh, dang it, and then unscrew it and put batteries in it, and then turn the audio back on.
Oh, that's funny. I'd love to see that. That'd be a perfect day, April Fools. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Oh,
it is surprising, but I haven't been asked several times about that. So what makes it crack? Is there batteries in that?
Johnny did a fun April Fool's video a couple of years ago. And he was like, we're going to put accelerometer in the tip, and we're going to have all this USB plug in the bottom of it. We're going to do all this data. And
I can remember that. Yeah.
It was just close enough to where I'm like, maybe.
I wonder if I can see maybe at some point there being some kind of technology thing where you could have something that like internally in the whip or in the handle or something that goes through it that like maybe goes, oh, here's how fast the tip of the whip went at this point, or something like that. Like some way of like measuring.
And that'd be awesome.
Or you could also, like my target whip. I think Tori coined this, but I love the idea of it. He was like, yeah, there's speed knots, right? Like the speed holes in The Simpsons or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Because this is my like go-to speed and accuracy one. But I just like the idea of like, oh, like as a joke. Like, yes, with speed knots,
Exactly. Oh man. Well, Paul, thank you so much for chatting with me. Is there anything else that you were hoping to talk about and cover? I want to show people
probably a million things.
A million things. Well, you're going to have another episode.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do another one.
Yeah, we should do this on like a semi-regular basis.
I like the idea of it being just regular too, because it's like what updates with like what's going on with the whip world, or like after events and stuff like that. It would be really cool to do one after the Vegas event in 2019, but that was before all this anyway. So and they haven't done one since. So
I mean, I got started doing this because of the virtual WhipCon. That's what got me inspired, and and then going out to WhipCon again this year got me going again. So
I'm glad you made it out too, because it really is where you have to experience it to really get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I highly recommend everybody go. That whips it all.
I do see a lot of people for the first time going, and at first they're nervous, and they kind of have this like, oh, I don't know, like people I look up to, or this that, or they're self anxious about like, oh, am I going to be good enough? And then when you go, you just realize, oh, we're all just a bunch of people who are really into this thing and love talking to anybody about this.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, exactly right. So I assume you are still, of course, I mean, you're sitting there working on a whip, but you are accepting orders for new ones as well.
Yeah, there is a wait time now.
So get on the list as soon as possible. Here, actually, I'll bring up your page again. So
just tip for people ordering, not just from me, but from anybody. I don't know what's been going on the last like 6 months or so, but everybody seems to not have updated not everybody, but like it's grown a lot in the last 6 months of like, they'll order and they'll be like, oh, I forgot to change my address in my PayPal. So if that's happening, them buying something from me, then I'm sure that's happening with them and causing them problems in other places. Like, just go make sure your address is updated before you order.
That business tip for any sellers out there. That's important.
Yeah.
Jump on here, add to cart, buy yourself a proper MidwestWhips whip.
Oh yeah. Did you want to talk about the indie whips or the 1936 all? Or
yeah, please do. I definitely wanted to. I tell me a little bit about these and the differences and stuff.
Yeah, so like kind of the way I break it down most simply is basically like the modern indie is essentially just like a regular classic, like just straight up American bullwhip with the basic details of an indie whip. It's got the checkerboard handle. It's 12 plat. It has the 5, 4, 2, and 3 pass knots. Has 6 plat wrist loop. So it's just like the general details. Then the 1936 is like the going for minutia screen X street details, basically.
Okay, with a larger heel knot. Looks like slightly larger diameter handle.
And there's so many details in that like I don't even think people would know about. But like even like there's little things like, because it's based off of me studying all the Morgans that I've studied, both the screen used ones that I've seen in person, as well as photos of screen used ones, as well as looking through all the movies in detail, as well as talking to Morgan, as well as having taken apart a Morgan from the 70s or 80s, just like trying to figure out how all these different little things happen, including like one of the common things that I don't think people know a lot about is there tends to be a little dent. I don't know how much you can see it on the thing. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't really come across super well on this one, because sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less. But there's sort of like, it's hidden a little bit by the knot, but there's sort of like a little divot, and that comes from the way that the bolster was put on, and the way Morgan put on the sort of the knot foundation coverings and stuff like that. So like, wow, down to like minutia stuff like that, where it's just like to a certain extent strain with the whole handles and the diamond thing is a little bit of kind of a point of contention for me. But basically there's a realm throughout all the movies of roughly how many handles are in the diamond. A lot of people want to go to, what is it, 12, 13, they say?
Right, yeah. 12.
That's based off of one screen used whip. So the parameters are really more between like, because like when he's climbing up on the plane before he fights the German guy with the propeller and all that.
Right. Yeah, there's
like 16 squares in that handle.
Okay.
So there's basically a parameter. Like I'd say that's the high end of squares and all the whips in the movie, and the low end is probably like 12.
Okay.
So basically, like I fit with like those parameters where it's like, as long as I try to make it more around like 13, 14 to be like right in the middle of the parameters. But those are like, it has to be within that range. Because the other thing people don't realize about Morgan's is like, everybody's trying to base it off of what they saw on the screen or one specific whip. And Morgan didn't look at it to that detail. He wasn't trying to make the exact same diameter size. He wasn't trying to make it wasn't to that level. He was just making some whips for a thing that nobody knew was going to be a big deal, you know?
Right.
So
good.
Yeah. So he had his method and he had what he did. So I even use the same bolster leather that he uses from the same place that he gets it from. And also the leather comes from the same tannery packer, you know?
Right. Wow. That is the minutia. And what about the fall hide?
It's essentially, oh, sorry.
And what about the fall, the white hide?
Oh, yeah, the white hide. That's the standard, like, sort of, especially Raiders. Sometimes people think there's a darker fall in the later ones, but I think most of the time they're just dirty for on-set use. You know, like the Streets of Cairo, the fall looks like a Latigo one potentially, but it's just got a bunch of dirt covered on it from the street. You know,
right? Yeah, I've talked to several people about that recently, and yeah, we were going over the strength versus the use of different types of fall leathers, and indie people, they've got to have their white.
Well, I really like white hide a lot. It's like I'd say it's my favorite. My second favorite would be red hide.
Okay,
but white hide, like, I mean, on my hey, leave it alone, buddy. No. The fall on my Australian prototype.
Mm-hmm.
That thing's at least, that's probably 15 years old. That's the original fall still on it.
Whoa.
Yeah. Okay. I use that whip a lot. You know?
That's lasted longer than most of my falls. My goodness.
When it comes to white hide, I mean, sometimes there's like, you know, sometimes there's a bad spot in the fall that you couldn't.
Oh, sure.
You didn't know when you were making it and stuff, because it's not always visually obvious. But overall, it's just white hide, the way it's tanned and stuff, you need to grease it way more frequently. And that will help keep it more the longevity and keep it from snapping off and stuff like that.
What do you use to take care of your falls?
Your
conditioning?
I like Picard. Picard's works great for Picard's or Phoebings. Both of those I've used over the years for, I don't know what it is specifically about that, but that seems to work really well for the white hide compared to using some like my braiding grease. Like
Right.
some that can help condition it a little bit. And when making it, it's good to use. But like for the after it's made, I don't know, whatever reason, maybe it's the beeswax or something.
Right.
In the cards that like helps kind of solidify it more.
Yeah, seals it, holds in, keeps out the moisture both.
Yeah, and also it's weird too finding out like different leathers react differently in different climates. So like I remember learning this by accident once when it was when I went out to Jared Deere's place and I had a pair of white hide stock whips, and I left them out in his barn overnight. And when I came back out, and I guess it was just the humidity during that time of the year or what, but I came back out and they were like sopping wet.
Oh my!
There was it hadn't rained, there was no water or anything. It was just it had absorbed the moisture from the air.
Whoa!
And I thought I was like, wow, I didn't even know it could do that. You know,
right? It's a little scary.
Yeah. Wow. And then you grease them up and they're fine. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Do you have trouble sourcing some of that material sometimes? I know that I have heard that there were some issues a little while back about getting certain alum tanned or whatever people were trying to find.
I used to get really good, what was it? Indian tan latigo that was greased.
Okay.
And it was really, really good. And then the place stopped selling it. Or selling it.
Of course.
And I haven't, I mean, they still do the regular, but they don't have the greased version. And, but the regular stuff is so dry. It snapped. It was more brittle than probably what your experience with white hide, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I just stopped using it. I still have some of the, once they stopped offering it, I still have a little bit left of that I've been like hoarding. Yeah. This is that,
oh, look at that. Nice.
Stuff, and I've got just a little partial piece of a hide left, and that's it.
Wow. Well, cool, man. That is. Oh,
I hadn't pulled that out in a while. So.
Right at fingertips, though. Wow. All right. Well, I think everybody should go buy a whip from you. And we haven't had we didn't really go into the whole.
I'll get it out as fast as I can. I've only got 2 hands.
Until you figure out how to grow a couple more. I want to come back and talk about some of the Hollywood stuff you've done and all the different movies and how those have changed. And are there some of those that you're particularly proud of, or that you're like there's some have over a dozen different movies you have listed here? Like,
oh yeah, there's probably even more that I don't know about. Like I was just telling somebody about this the other day. I knew Alex Green, the stunt guy.
Yeah,
he was Anthony Hopkins' stunt double in Zorro and all that.
Oh, okay.
And he worked out a thing to where I was able to get the whip that Anthony Hopkins used in the candle scene from him.
Whoa, cool!
And he also threw in this whip. He said from this TV show Andromeda that had Kevin Sorbo or whatever way back in the day.
Right.
And he threw that in with it, and then I get it in the mail, and I'm like, I made that when I was 17.
Oh my god!
One of the whips that I made for Western Stage Props, and they the prop people painted it and stuff like that, and I had no idea. Like sometimes, so there's probably several things that I don't even know that my whips are in. You know?
Right? Yeah. The stunt guys, do they usually like source it and then supply it to a stunt guy, or do they bring in a stunt guy and they assume he has his own whips, or how does
it varies?
Works.
Like sometimes it's the prop people who source it,
mm-hmm.
and they'll either source it direct from a maker if they do their research with that, or they'll buy it from a prop house, or like somewhere like Western Stage Props that sells them for that reason. And then sometimes it comes from, the stunt guy brought his own whips and he only wants to use his whips or something. You know?
Right.
Yeah. I think to a certain extent that's probably what happened with Indy 4 is that Jalal just used Jacka. So then when he was training Harrison Ford and stuff, he's like, you should get these Jackas, you know?
Right. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
So you just never know how things come about. I mean, and also it's very rare that they credit a whip maker in the actual credits, by the way, too, because to them, they're just like, oh, that's just another prop we bought, like a toothbrush for set, you know?
Right. Like I think on IMDb, a lot of it is uncredited prop supplier.
Yeah.
Places. I'm glad you're able to get them listed in there, though.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit, but But at this point, I think I have enough stuff where if I put one in, they see like, oh yeah, oh, he did it for these. Okay, yeah. Like the rundown was the first one that I knew about.
The rundown.
That was the first one where I knew I was making a whip for a movie.
Wow. Was that what did that feel like when you knew that? Was that like intimidating or what were?
It was exciting because I was like, I think I was 19, and it was also like that was before The Rock is who The Rock is now. You know, that was his first like starring leading.
Oh yeah.
The only thing he had done before that was Scorpion King, I think, or something like that. Scorpion something. But he was more like a bad guy or something. I don't remember the movie, but I know the rundown was the first time of like, let's see him be an leading action hero. You know,
right.
And nobody remembered that movie, but everybody remembers Walking Tall, the next one that came out. And my friends used to make fun of me when Walking Tall came out, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's a great movie," because he uses these like big 2x4s. So my friends would always rib me, and they're like, "Yeah, Paul made the 2x4s from Walking Tall."
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I'd
probably say the funnest one was probably
that's a good one.
Oh, the Lone Ranger's funny. That one was they had bought a couple through Stage Props and they had Joe Strain make it.
Okay.
And then at one point Mark Allen called me up and was like, "Hey, I need you to make another one of those whips for the Lone Ranger like you did before." And I was like, "I didn't." And he was like, "Oh, well, your work's like Joe's, and just make one like that." So Joe Strain and I both made whips for that one.
Nice. I saw somebody posted one for sale on one of the trade places today. It was Joe Strain, Lone Ranger. Yeah. So I forget who's selling it.
But I think definitely like the Tarantino ones are pretty cool. I didn't expect that. That was pretty neat. Django and
Django, yeah.
What was the other one? Inglourious Bastards. But Inglourious Bastards, they like you barely see the whip for like a split second.
I was gonna say I don't remember it all.
They bought 3 whips for that movie, and you see it like millisecond. And then Django has got like a 5-minute sequence, and plus a couple of times it shows up, and they only bought 1 for that movie. It's just funny how that works sometimes. And then like the Prince of Persia, I think I made like 18 or 20 whips or something like that for that. And you don't see the whips in the movie that much, and a lot of times they're CGI'd, and then and then they had to come back and order some more for pickup shots because people walked off the set with whips and were just taking them. And also, Bernardo Del Carpio was living with me for a little bit at that time, and he helped me braid some of those.
Oh, cool. Yeah, those are. Wonder whatever happened to those whips.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. I've never seen them pop back up anywhere.
Right, just hanging on someone's wall, probably. Some collection.
The one that was probably the most creatively fun to work on was the Shadowhunters one. It became a TV show called Shadowhunters, but there was a movie before it called The Mortal Instruments. They ended up using the whips onto in the TV show too. I think the TV show went for probably like 3 or 4 seasons. But that was one where like they had a decent budget and they were like, "Hey, we want to do something creatively unique or different," and they sent me like the what is it I forget what they're called, the guys who draw the concept art and stuff like that.
Okay. Storyboard stuff?
Yes, that kind of stuff. And they sent me like concept art of what they were wanting to do with it. And I was like, oh yeah, she wears this bracelet. It's like a snake, and then it morphs into a whip. So based on budget and a couple other things, we had to try to like creatively figure out a thing. And they were wanting me to like actually create a whole new whip out of a new material, whatever. But because of like budget restriction and some other issues and how long it would take to try to figure this out, we ended up just going with rawhide and then painting it. So I actually have the prototype for that.
Oh yeah, let's see that. That would be cool. Yeah, I'd like to see how you figured out the handle thing.
Well, what ended up happening with the handle thing on that is that we ended up just making essentially like a really long, like a snake whip, and then had a thing fixture at the butt end of it without a knot, so that their prop guys made the thing that went around the arm, and then they seated the whip down into it, basically.
Oh,
but
okay.
In the prototype I made, I actually had like wire. You can see some of that wire there, but there's actually wire that goes up through this with the intent of so it would be able to wrap. I didn't put enough of it in there, but it was supposed to wrap around and then form to the wrist.
Oh, okay. So it like stayed stiff as kind of like a pipe cleaner sort of.
Yeah, that's the effect I was trying to do. Yeah, but they ended up going like, we'll just have the prop guys do the handle thing, and I also put the little snake head hitch at the end.
Oh, nice.
Because all snake based and whatnot.
Right. That's super cool.
But that was probably the most fun because I actually had to like create from what I knew of different construction methods, I had to like figure out a construction method that would work for this to get the weight that they wanted, as well as fit the handle that they made. Actually, oh yeah, and here's the thing. They're like, they sent me this little piece of pipe, and they're like, that's what it has to fit in.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
It looks oddly small. What is that?
So I had to like
20 mil? Something like that?
I never actually measured it, I don't think.
Wow, that is super small.
Well, because I think I have the pieces here. Yeah, so I actually just started making all these, trying out different construction methods to make them see what would fit. And then, and also they wanted them a certain amount of weight and certain heaviness to it. So they're actually pretty heavily shot loaded. So I just had to figure out how to do all that stuff with it. Yeah, got some layers in there and stuff.
Yeah, nice. Is it common to hear from them on the performance side of a whip versus just the look, like wanting it weighted and shot loaded and stuff? That's.
Oh yeah, they wanted to look like it had a lot of weight when it became the whip. So, but it maybe I kind of disagreed with it. I was like, I don't think you should make it that heavy, But whatever, they're ordering it.
Oh,
well, and then there's times too when there's different stuff where like, what was it? It was the TV show Arrow called.
Oh, cool.
Probably like 8 years ago or something like that. And they were like, yeah, we want 4 12-foot and 3 10-foot and 2 6-foot or whatever. And they were like, but our budget is $300.
All right, mini snappers for everybody.
Yeah, I was like, hey, good luck. But no, I mean, I was like, your research prop guy didn't do his research.
Not so much, no.
Then you see it in the whip work is terrible because the whips aren't that good. So.
I'd be curious to see what kind of whip they had at all. Gosh. So Kingsman Circle, that's some great work in there with Loop, right? Loop Rollins.
Oh, Loop did an amazing job. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But he's doing real whip work in it. It's so cool. Like, it's CGI over it for some of the effects and stuff like that. But he's actually like, I really would love to see more, because I feel like we're going more into the CGI stuff as time goes on.
Yeah.
And it never looks right.
I mean, Indy 5 had a lot of it too, and it's
yeah. And I'm sure that had something to do with what do you call it, insurance reasons and stuff.
Yeah,
because in Indy 4 they didn't even want him to use the whip for real at all, but he was like, no, I'm using the whip. And I'm sure at this point when he's much older and everything than that,
right?
It's like, okay, come on,
Sure. Yeah, I think they made a handle or something. I don't know if you know much about what was provided for Indy 5. And
yeah, I was in the running for that, so I know a little bit. Yeah.
What were they asking for? Do you know?
I didn't get that far with it specifically, but I think they probably did some. My guess would be they probably did some kind of like handle type of thing.
Yeah, I think in the behind the scenes stuff they show there's a scene where he's at a table, surrounded by a lot of people. They're doing, it was the auction scene where he's trying to the dial of destiny back.
Yeah,
and he pulls a whip out and he's running everyone off. So in that,
and as whip people, how impractical that is in that space.
Right, exactly. That you can't get your whip up, and he's up against the wall behind him, plus surrounded by people. It would just get tangled in something or someone.
Yeah.
And so they were saying due to insurance reasons, with lots of actors so close that they were like just all CG'd.
Yeah.
It was very cool scene but it didn't look right as someone that knows how to whip works, and I was very sad about that.
We're burdened by knowing whips too well. You know?
I think so.
Because I wonder. I've tried to. It's like, oh man, is everybody else watching this who doesn't know whip stuff? Just go, that was awesome.
I think so. I hope so.
I hope so too. It's we know too much.
We know too much.
But that's why it's cool. Like in the Kingsman, like Loop was doing some awesome stuff, you know, and like practically for real. Also, like the Rundown, a lot of that. I think, if not most, if not all of it. No, not all of it. Most of it is practical. There's a couple like CGI spots, but but there's a lot of whip work in that movie compared to others.
Yeah, there is. It's definitely worth watching that show. In Kingsman, the behind the scenes, they have several really cool showing Loop do the stuff with the stuntman. And yeah, that's worth watching in itself.
Yeah. As a whip fan, like just watch that clip. You know?
Right. It might even be on YouTube. Maybe I could find it for the description of the show.
I feel like I just shared it on Facebook recently because it came up in like my memories or something. But I don't know if it was a YouTube clip or if it was just on Facebook or what.
Yeah, people should go out and check that out. All right. Well, awesome, man.
Loop's super awesome.
Yeah, he is. Oh, add him to my list too.
Oh yeah.
See? Loop, if you're listening to this, give me a call. But yeah, I need to be respectful of your time too. We're at 2 hours here, and right, we're just having a good time. We're just hanging out.
I love talking to this, man.
That's what this show is really about. Just
although it's all, I keep getting distracted with the talking. This is the longest it's ever taken me to do a knot. Right. It's almost done. I think I'm on the last.
A little bit to say. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that looks nice. Is that 6x7 or?
Yeah, 6-7 herringbone.
Yeah,
that's like kind of been my go-to for a while now.
Yeah, I like how that. I personally don't like to double up. I know the doubles and doubling or tripling on a heel knot is that traditional indie look, but I really like something like that to where it's just lots of stuff.
It's like Whipmaker. It's like that 3-pass knot. It's like oh, it's so gross. But like. The whole reason Morgan hated tying knots, so he was just like, just pick a simple knot and boom, there you go.
Right. Like I had one, and I had this strand cut from something else, so I made this really fun. This is just a little 4-foot indie.
Oh, nice.
But for the heel knot, I just kept expanding it until it got bigger and bigger until it just finally covered. That was the size of the strand I had.
Yeah.
I think it
was. That's how a lot of the older woodmakers in Australia would do. It was just like, you just grab the strand and you bump it up from a 5/4 to a 6/7 or whatever you needed to do to get it to fit. Yeah.
I don't even know what number this ended up being. I just kept going up.
I really like the look of it though.
Yeah, thanks. It kind of has almost a circus feel to it. But
yeah. Well, also you have that Joe Strain whip. I think he showed me at the con. That really nice whip.
It's like, where is it? So this is the Strain, and so the heel knot on this one is also super super well done.
Oh yeah, that looks great. I also love the tricolor, and it's got the classic. It's just you just feel a Joe Strain, you know.
Yeah. And this is one of those that you just start cracking it, and it just takes over. It just does the work for you.
It's also with it's like one like that. It's like, oh, can't wait for it to be broken in, but I don't want it to lose its newness either. You know, so you're like conflicted. Like, how much do I really use it?
Right. I mean, I love using it, and I think I'm going to enjoy seeing how it changes over the years.
Yeah,
it hasn't been used a ton, but yeah.
So I've had so many Joe Strain whips, especially when I was really in studying him for a while, that I just loved so much. But you know, they come and go. You know, there's whatever. But there is one that I have held on to forever.
Ooh,
and it's one of my favorites for like just weird personal reasons. Like one of the whips from Raiders that I got to see in person had like this same kind of like diameter, and just something about this whip reminded me of that. And I don't know. It's one of his old ones from Stage Props back in the day before he started doing the 5.4s. There's just something about this one in particular I've always loved, and it just how it like rolls down.
Oh yeah, look at that.
So like I used to use this all the time.
A little more broken in than this one I have, but
oh yeah, this thing's probably 25 years old at this point or something. But
oh wow,
I used to use it a lot, and then at a certain point I wanted to try to preserve it more, so I haven't been using it much at all. Or maybe crack it like once a year or something.
wow, you have such an awesome collection there. So much history.
Oh yeah, there's so much that's not even up. I mean, like I've got a whole big bin over here full of that blue bin. It's just filled with all sorts of whips and stuff, and box down here, and
Oh my
stuff
god,
in storage. Like I don't even know. I got to go through all this stuff at some point because I haven't since I moved into this place, and it's like I forget all the stuff that I got in there. You know?
yeah, yeah.
I do. I know I've got one whip that somebody found. On the banks of the Mississippi River. That's from like the 1800s. It was like they were like excavating to like do something, like build something or whatever it was, and so it was like 6 foot down in the ground,
Buried in the dirt.
Yeah, buried in like the mud and the clay and everything. And it's from like the old times of the coming up the Mississippi River for where they used to run whatever it was materials and stuff, you know,
Right.
supplies.
I don't know if they used it there. I know they used to use cattle on the side of rivers to help pull barges up.
That might have been what that's from. Maybe it was like a cattle driving kind of situation. Yeah.
Wow.
But just random, you never know. I mean, like the Henderson pattern on that stock whip handle is based off of, I never got a chance to see it in person, unfortunately. But this guy used to send me pictures of it because he had gotten this whip because his neighbor? No, he found it in his closet because he had forgotten that it got passed down from his grandfather, I think. When his grandfather was in the war, he was stationed in Australia in like, what was 30s or something like that.
Okay.
Found it hanging in a tree.
Oh my gosh.
Just randomly kept it, passed it down to his dad and then him or whatever, and he forgot about it and found it in the closet and was like, hey, do you know who made this? And I'm looking at it going, that's a 48 plat by 24 plat Henderson. Like, that's crazy. Like, he just found that, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Just wild.
It is just wild. I can't imagine. Is that one that was buried in the dirt? Is it still in decent shape? Is it?
Decent enough. I don't know if it's right here, if it's buried back in another box. Yeah, I think it might be buried somewhere. But it was in decent enough shape. Like it had like, I mean, it's clearly, I think the handle's broken.
Oh, okay.
Like you can feel it like bend in the middle. It was just like, I think it was maybe like 6 plat, 8 plat, something like that. Probably buckskin or cowhide or something like that.
I wonder if the clay helped keep it like almost conditioned in a way so it didn't break down as much as it could have.
It might have, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to find that thing again and see how it's doing.
Yeah, you should post
maybe make a post about it or something.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And you should definitely publish your Cecil Henderson book when you get a chance.
I'm going to do something with all that stuff because I did do a ton of research stuff, and then there's also, I mean, it's just hard to compile it all together, you know?
Right.
Because it's not just him. It's kind of, I'd love to do one about all the kind of like greats from that era and stuff like that.
Right. In my day job, I'm in IT, so we have to document all kinds of stuff because somebody changes one thing, nobody else knows what they did. So my boss calls it a bus book. Like, well, bus, what would BUS stand? Like, no, it's in case you get hit by a bus. I'm like, yeah, that's dark, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well,
I mean, I guess that's what the binder's for, I guess.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I hope you get a chance to do that, and hopefully people will continue ordering lots of whips from you, and people will continue to be excited about whips and whip making and whip cracking.
Yeah, I think so.
Any of our areas here, you should come out and hang out with some of these whip cracking events that are going on. And
well, yeah, if nothing else, I want a bunch of people to make whip cracking events all over, so I have a reason to go travel to all these places.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, I've heard rumors. I told you I was going to call out some of my friends, but I've heard rumors that the East Coast might be doing something. That Ian and Alyssa might be doing something down the road.
Yeah.
And I think there might be some other people over on the East Coast. I'm in Central, Cats, and Vegas there. And so yeah, there's several things that might be coming up sooner rather than later.
I see it coming.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. I think it's on its way. It just takes time, you know.
Yeah, let's do it. I might be asking questions about those early days of figuring out how to reserve things and keep the cops from being called out to crazy people.
Well, that was one of the things we had to figure out for the LA Con was we had to get a permit. That's why we couldn't do like the Sunday at Buena Vista Park is just for classes, and it has to be, you can't be there unless you're one of the 30 people in the class, because you can't get a permit there. Like they don't offer them at that park, so the limit is 30 people. So that's why we have to do that, and that's why we held the main day at the other park, because that park we can get a permit for like 200 people or so.
Okay.
And we did have the cops come the first year, and we were like, "Hey, we got a permit. It's cool."
That was interesting.
Yeah,
but I'm hoping that, you know, being in Texas or even in Vegas, both a culture of entertainers and here a culture of whips. Like maybe I can have cops out there with the whip too. You know, like we have mounted police officers here. I mean, that's not unusual to see them on a horse for stuff. I mean, they will commonly, or other times that they're going to need to be more mobile than they could be on a motorcycle, they'll be on a horse. Like it's not unusual to see a horse with a badge.
Well, it's like, well, and also I see more and more, it's really cool to see more and more people getting into it too, in a diverse way also. Like there's, now there's like a bunch of women whip makers where like there was almost none back 20 years ago, you know?
Right.
Like so it's like, it's just so cool to see like it's becoming more of a all around. I think more people are starting to understand it too, because I think at first people would just see somebody cracking a whip in the park and it was like, what a crazy person, you know?
Right.
Or they jump to some weird conclusions and stuff. And like now it's like the social media thing, like I said, like having random regular people just be like, oh, hey, I thought of you because I saw this whip thing on my feed. And it's like, and people doing the tricks and stuff, like the can cutting stuff. And, you know, people are starting to see it more as like, oh, this is just like flow arts, or it's just like some other kind of hobby, you know?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I was cracking Cat's whips, actually. She does this really cool fade color transition. Hers. All right. Color change, I think she calls it. And yeah, I believe she splices them in the paracord. I'm not 100% sure, but it is gorgeous, and hers roll out just beautifully. And yeah, one of these days I'll have one of her whips.
I'm glad I got to meet her this year. The year before, you know how it is there. There's just so many people.
Oh yeah,
you know, going to talk, and like I didn't realize she was there. Our paths didn't cross that first year she went, but so I'm glad we actually got to talk this year.
Yeah, I'm so glad. So many great people there. Once again, I look forward to next year.
It's just tons of fun. You know?
Yeah, it really is. Well, looks like you finished your knot. So
yeah.
I
still got 3 more to do, but I'm going to give myself a break.
All right. Well, I do need to cut it off somewhere. I have to wrap this up and start editing and stuff myself.
Yeah, we'll do another one sometime.
We definitely will. We'll start making a list of things to talk about. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and just spreading whip joy. And yeah, just I say this at the end of every episode to just keep on cracking. But that means a lot to keep cracking exciting, keep the cracking. That's more like what I've heard Australians say, you know, crack. They use it as a verb also for other things other than just cracking a whip.
Keep calm and crack on or something.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And crack on. I've heard them say that, to just like get busy. And so it really means it. I think that's kind of what you're doing. You continue to crack on with so many different parts of this whole culture. So
yeah,
for doing it.
I guess that's one thing if I have is perseverance. I guess
you gotta
have some difficult times, you know.
Right. And yeah, we definitely should talk about that sometime as well. I'll add that to my list. But man, you have a great evening, and thank you all, everyone that's listening. Go to MidwestWhips.com to order a whip from Paul.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It was a good time.
Thank you again, Paul, for being on the show, and thank you all for being here and listening. Since the episode was recorded, I actually got a mini bowl from Paul here. I'm showing it on video, and it is a lot of fun. Check out my social media. You can see me putting out some candles with it. It's a blast. Get yourself one of these. But and remember, if you want to help keep the show on the air, please go to whipchatpodcast.com/donate and buy me a coffee or something. I appreciate any help you guys can do. And with that, just like, subscribe, and keep on cracking.